been a long night for Rose Swally, a 32-year-old female who's babysitting her friend's children.
Hey, okay, settle down. Look, if you put down the guns, I'll let you watch a movie, okay? All right. You guys pick out what you want to watch, and I'll go make some popcorn. Cool?
She finally gets them calmed down enough. She goes to the kitchen.
All right, I'm coming. Jeez.
Oh my God, he shot himself!
What? Who?
Jeffrey, please, you gotta come help me!
She opens the door, and it's a neighbor, somebody she knows.
You two stay put, okay? Just watch the movie. I'll be right back.
You have to commend her babysitting skills because they obeyed her.
She goes inside.
Oh my God.
And just blood everywhere. Blood and brain parts everywhere.
What happened?
I don't know.
Did you call 911?
No.
Okay, sweetie, listen to me. Where is your phone? Yes, my neighbor's husband, he shot himself. I don't know, yes. Yes, please, just send someone, please.
Across town, Lieutenant Kenda is attempting to make a dent in an ever-growing stack of paperwork.
We have invoices from the evidence custodian requiring my signature for release of property. I had so many, I had a signature stamp, and I was looking at those and stamping my signature authorizing release.
It's Kenda. East Mountain? Already got it. Bye.
That particular area was high crime area in 1991. If I was going to walk a dog, I wouldn't walk it in that neighborhood for fear it would take incoming gunfire from somewhere.
You, Lieutenant.
Gentlemen,
That's what we got.
there you go. One male victim inside, gunshot wound to the head. Medical's already pronounced him dead.
We're advised the victim in this case is a 39-year-old Jeffrey Pearson. He suffered what appears to be a single gunshot wound to the head and is laying inside.
Got two witnesses, one of which is a wife. Both are reporting suicide right now.
Where are they?
Got them in separate cars.
Let's keep them up now. I'll take a look inside first.
Yes, sir. Hey, just a heads up, guys. This one's pretty gruesome.
Okay, then. Thank you.
There's a Harley-Davidson motorcycle parked in the living room, and it has an oil leak. You don't normally find a Harley-Davidson parked in somebody's living room.
Guys who ride Harleys tend to be really attached to them, and they like to keep them in the house like a pet.
A few feet from the motorcycle, the detectives catch their first glimpse of the victim.
Oh. Yikes. Yeah, you weren't kidding. No.
The damage to the head of the victim, Mr. Pearson, is so dramatic that it's going to require taking him to autopsy before we can determine where the gunshot entered and where it left his head. It's a mess. There is an enormous number of alcohol containers, both empty and partially full, around this room.
That's a 357. That partially explains his condition.
.357 Magnum. It is a very powerful round designed to cause a lot of trauma inside the body.
If it's in your mouth when the trigger is pulled, sometimes the crown of your skull attaches to a light fixture in the ceiling.
Let's get the body to the morgue right away. I want to get some autopsies off as soon as possible.
Yes, sir. 31 West Corner, we're going to transport. Hey, guys. I one went through the floor.
That's interesting.
As we further conduct our investigation, we do see what we believe to be a bullet fragment or bullet impact on the floor near the base of the wall. That's interesting. In a suicide, you don't see a lot of times where people, fire more than one round.
Let's see if CSI can make heads or tails of the blood spatter. I don't know where this guy was when he got shot.
Yes.
Blood spatter is very directional. It can give you a very close height measurement as to where the impact occurred. Was the person sitting down? Was it consistent with the scene? Is it inconsistent with the scene?
The circumstances we find there do not say suicide. What if they're involved in it and they're trying to lay it off on the deceased?
So you think this might not be a suicide?
I'm not sure. We'll have a better idea when we talk to 2 witnesses.
In the front yard, detectives speak with the victim's wife, Barbara Pearson.
Ma'am, I'm very sorry, but I need to ask some questions about your husband's death.
I don't understand why Doc would do this.
Doc?
My husband, his name's Jeffrey, but everyone calls him Doc. He's had the nickname since the war.
Barbara tells us that her husband was a Marine veteran, served in Vietnam, and suffered a very traumatic facial injury while in Vietnam, had a lot of reconstructive surgeries, and some mental pain, some PTSD.
The PTSD was terrible. His mind was a mess. When he got back, he put his body through hell, too.
She explained to us that later on he suffers a broken back during a parachute jump, and while riding a motorcycle, he suffers a serious injury during a traffic accident where he has to have one knee replaced.
She explained because of all these injuries, Doc was in a lot of pain, chronic pain, and he became a very heavy drinker, which is a very common way to self-medicate, particularly at that period of time. We had not been hit with opioids at that point, and so your cheapest, easiest pain relief, alcohol.
I mean, with everything he'd been through, I never could blame him for hitting a bottle. I guess he was feeling a lot of pain, but I never thought he'd kill himself.
Was there anything that happened last night that might have motivated the shooting?
I don't know. I mean, when I came home, he was having a great time with his friends Ricky and Jose.
I don't know about you, but I think Blue Oyster Cult. Hey, babe.
I'm drinking Reese of booze. I hope none of you plan on driving tonight.
I've thought about it. You guys could always just sleep on the floor next to the bike.
I went into the kitchen to clean up, and that's when it happened.
Doc, what was that?
She runs back into the living room. Doc is on the floor, head wound of massive nature, and the gun is a few inches from his hand.
It's like a bad dream.
Ma'am, you mentioned there were 2 men with your husband? It was our understanding from the officers that there was only one other person besides yourself when they arrived.
No, there were 2. Ricky Fulton and Jose Chavez. After the gunshot, when I came to see what happened, Ricky was heading out the door.
Well, that's a little odd, isn't it? If this is a suicide, everyone should be in shock. One of them shouldn't be running out the front door. That causes an alarm to go off in my head. Normally, a uniformed officer will never interrupt an interview.
Ma'am, do you think
Lieutenant?
But the look in his face told me it's time to interrupt.
Hey, excuse me. We're getting everybody out of the house right now. Looks like we found some explosives. I think the whole place is wired.
Now the situation has become dangerous.
All right, let's go.
The next step is to get everybody out of that crime scene before it literally blows up in our face. We are investigating the reported suicide of Jeffrey Pearson. However, officers have just discovered a booby trap, an improvised explosive device. And if there's one, there could be certainly more than one.
that really shifts the whole situation from something that has happened to something that may happen. And the may in this situation is not ever good.
Let's carefully evacuate the premises.
We don't know what we might encounter. Is some policeman going to hit a tripwire and ignite this place? I don't know. He's a Marine. He's got PTSD. Who knows what he's done in here?
So what's the IED look like? It's pretty damn crude. It's rigged up with a mousetrap of all things.
The uniformed officer says there's a 12-gauge shotgun shell live attached to a mousetrap that's been altered to alter the mousetrap spring device. So when it's moved or brushed or even touched, the spring releases, strikes the cap on the shotgun shell, and who's ever in front of it dies.
Oh, bomb strikes them.
They carry a tip that has mirrors in it and all kinds of pliers and various devices they use to examine explosives with. He goes in, he finds the shotgun shell mousetrap. He disarms it. He finds a second one. He disarms that one. He finds about a half dozen of these devices.
He is able to remove all of these devices, take the pressure off the spring, and render them safe.
We're all clear. All the devices were near the windows and doors. Somewhat of a crude alarm system.
Yeah, the victim's wife said he suffered from post-traumatic stress. That might explain his actions.
If you have someone who suffers from PTSD, they are paranoid. They believe their enemies will seek them out and kill them. And Mr. Pearson obviously hasn't, or he wouldn't be booby-trapping his own home.
While Jeffrey Pearson's apparent mental illness suggests he took his own life, Kenda's instincts tell him otherwise.
All right, Bill, I appreciate your help.
No problem.
So do you want to continue to talk to the wife? Now, she's still a little upset, so I was going to send her to one of the neighbor's house until she can kind of recover.
Yeah, I don't think we get much more from her right now. We need to talk to Jose, the other guy in the room. Can you bring him to the station? I want to swing by the morgue, see if they had a chance to look at the body.
All right. I'll meet you at the station.
The coroner's had the body for a few hours, and I'm hoping by looking at it, he can provide some insight as to whether Mr. Pearson died from suicide or murder.
Hey, Doc, any updates?
For starters, I was able to run the gunshot residue tests on his hands.
Gunshot residue will pick up barium and antimony from the primer, and will determine whether somebody was holding a firearm. As part of the investigation, it's reported that he fired the weapon. We want to see if we can confirm that.
Gunshot residue test came back positive.
Okay, so he pulled the trigger on a gun. Yes, he did. Maybe he fired that shot into the floor, but he didn't put this one in his own head. Somebody put it there for him.
Anything else?
I recovered the jacket and the slug from inside the skull. The autopsy isn't finished yet, but that's where we stand for now.
Every little bit helps. Thank you.
Kenda's best hope for getting to the truth lies with one of the two eyewitnesses.
We go to see Jose Chavez, and he is a nervous wreck.
I didn't do anything. I swear. I went over to Doc's. Doc and his neighbor Ricky were in there drinking. They were pretty lit up.
Yo! With the cops?
Oh, hey, Doc. What's going on? Hey, Ricky, what's going on?
Hey, what's up?
Get a beer, man. Come on in.
All right. Catch up.
How long you guys been drinking?
What month is it?
Okay, so we have 3 happy drunks and a motorcycle in his living room. I don't think the motorcycle shot Mr. Pearson, so talk to me, Jose. What's going on here?
After a while, I was feeling pretty good myself.
He says while they're drinking, Ricky and Doc decide they're going to start playing with a gun.
This is a perfect self-defense gun.
Shiny.
One shot stopping him dead in his tracks. That thing isn't loaded, is it?
It is now. Bullets are right there in that cup.
Jesus, man! What are you doing? That's crazy.
Just do a good night, Doc.
He thought he unloaded it, but he left one in it. He puts the gun down.
After about a minute, Doc's wife Barbara came home. She went to the kitchen, and I got up to leave. And then the gun went off again.
Jose says as he turns his back to leave, a shot is fired, he turns around, and Doc is on the floor. He doesn't know how it happened, he doesn't know who had the gun.
So you're telling me you didn't see anything at all?
No, man, I just heard it. That's all.
Obviously, he's lying through his teeth. It's obvious to me that he is.
So you saw him playing with a gun. You saw him shoot around into the floor. But somehow you missed it when he shot himself in the head? Come on, Jose.
I mean, I saw him moving out the corner of my eye, but my back was turned.
We're pretty confident he's playing games. His mannerisms, everything tell us he's lying.
All right, Jose, I'll tell you what. You telling the truth? How about we hook you up to a polygraph?
What's that?
Oh, it's a machine that will tell us if you're true. We got one right down the hall.
Whatever, man, I'll take your test.
All right, stay put.
Okay, fine. We arrange one. We deliver Jose to the polygraph suite.
Give me about an hour.
All right, I'll see you then. I'm head to the office. I'll be back in a bit.
While I'm waiting for a result to come out of the polygraph suite, I get a phone call from the crime scene technician, Charlie Green, who says he has some updates on a blood spatter that he has interpreted in the house.
What do you got for me?
I just got to tell you, the results are pretty conclusive.
Green explains that upon measurements and viewing the spatter, he was shot squarely in the back of the head, back to front, and the blood spatter goes directly from the head to the opposing wall.
There's just no way this was a suicide, Lieutenant. Someone else shot him.
I appreciate the information.
Well, we happen to have another person in our possession, Mr. Jose Chavez, who is present when this happens and who has a memory lapse at the crucial moment. So, Jose, what are you going to tell us now? We're investigating the death of Jeffrey Pearson, a 39-year-old veteran, which was described to us as a suicide. We're now in possession of physical evidence that says the exact opposite. It's not a suicide, it is a homicide. Now the question is, who is responsible?
Convinced that witness Jose Chavez is lying, Kenda has asked him to take a polygraph.
Is your name Jose Chavez?
Yes, it is.
Are you now in Colorado Springs?
Yes.
The polygraph was just a machine that reads how his body is reacting to these questions.
Did you see who shot Jeffrey Pearson?
No, I did not.
And so it's very hard to hide that.
You should hide from that.
I'll say this. If I were a teacher and Jose Chavez was a student, I'd give him an F.
All right, thank you. Give us a few minutes.
Sure.
Mr. Chavez, we need to talk. Now we know you've been lying to us this entire time. Why don't you tell us what really happened?
Don't waste my time, or I'll figure out a way to blame you for Pearson's death. What happened?
Look, I ain't no snitch. I don't even want to be involved, okay?
Look around. You're involved up to your neck in all this.
I said, Earth to Jose, where are you right now? You're in a police station, talking to me. Do you think you're not involved in this? As I think you are.
Okay, fine. After Doc shot a bullet through the floor, they went right back to messing around with the gun.
What do you mean messing around?
They were playing Russian roulette.
Russian roulette was originally played to exhibit bravery, that you are brave enough to play with a loaded firearm and take a chance on killing yourself. And then it became just a game. Alcohol is almost always involved.
So, what? They took one bullet, put it in the chamber, spun it, and then pointed it to their heads?
Not really.
It wasn't like one guy holding it to his head, you know, and click and let's see if it dry fires or kills me. They were actually shooting at each other, which is almost incomprehensible.
And then it happened. Ricky shot Doc.
How do we know this was an accident? Is there any history of bad blood between Doc and Ricky that you're aware of?
Jeez, I don't know. I don't know Ricky. I just know he's from the neighborhood. As I said,
We now have reason to believe Ricky Fulton is responsible for Doc's death. What level of responsibility, we don't know yet. Whether it's murder or reckless negligent homicide, we have him as the shooter.
So Jose explains where Ricky lives, and we go find Ricky.
All right, Jen, let's stay alert. We're not sure what we're dealing with here.
We're prepared for the worst. You always are when you make contact, particularly with a potential suspect in a shooting.
Police, open up! He's in there. Back off. Back off.
We hear him. It sounds as if he's bracing the door with something. Is he another IED guy?
Being concerned with the fact that we just went through one place where there were improvised explosive devices. He's friends with our victim. We don't know if it's booby trapped or something else.
Ricky Fulton, we know you're in there. Come on with your hands up.
We explain to him we're going to come into that house, and you're not going to like it when we do. We're not in a position to want to hurt you, but we will do so if you don't open this door.
We don't want anyone to get hurt. We have to come in there. We can't guarantee your safety. So kids, come on with your hands up. See your hand.
just don't shoot me, all right? I'm unarmed.
Stop right there. Turn around.
All right.
Down your knees. Go ahead, Cup.
We're pleasantly surprised when he steps outside. At that time, he's detained, and we take him in for an interview.
I don't know what that other guy told you, but Doc, he had PTSD.
His story initially, without even questioning him, is, I can't believe Doc shot himself. Oh my God, he shot himself.
He was suicidal.
He explains to us that Doc's upset that the Gulf War's just started, being a Marine, always a Marine. He would like to be part of this, but he can't anymore. And for some reason, I guess the depression took over, according to Rigby, and Doc just shot himself.
Growing impatient, Kenda tests Ricky with a simple question.
All right, so when Doc shot himself, where exactly were you?
Doc was on the couch and I was on the other side of the room.
Yeah, Ricky, I don't think so.
We know from the physical evidence, the blood spatter, the autopsy, and everything else, that Ricky was behind him with a gun to the back of his head when he pulled the trigger.
Yeah, I'm getting tired of this. I know what happened.
We confront him with the physical evidence and the witness, and on and on. Ricky finally decides his attempt at telling us otherwise isn't going to work.
All right. I did it. I shot him, okay? But it was an accident, man. I mean, we were all just drinking and fooling around with the gun. Oh! Come on. Let me see.
Never.
Thank you. See? What's the matter with you?
He explains that they were playing kind of a stupid game of Russian roulette with a firearm, and that they're dry firing this weapon.
Do me.
And they're all passing back and forth, and it's a very friendly thing. Everybody's laughing, nobody's angry, nobody's confronting anybody. They're playing with that gun.
Somehow Doc shot a hole into the floor.
So the bullet in the floor and the residue on Doc's hand is from that event. He fired what he thought was a non-shot into the floor of this apartment.
It kind of scared the shit out of us, so we stopped for a while and then started drinking again, and out came the gun. And Doc must have loaded it when we weren't looking.
So when Pearson fires that shot into the floor, it's very likely that Ricky honestly believes that that was the live round that was in the gun. He either doesn't notice or doesn't remember that Pearson loaded another live round to continue the game.
Fine, watch. Come on, Doc.
What are you guys doing? You know what? I'm gonna head home. You guys be safe.
So now it's his turn with the gun. He takes the gun, holds it up to Doc's head. Pull the trigger, and it discharges.
Doc! Doc! Ricky, what did you do?
Ricky panics, puts the gun next to Pearson's hands, and runs out the door.
What did you do, Doc? Get up! Doc, come on, get up!
Mrs. Pearson runs back in from the kitchen screaming, "What have you done to my husband?" And Jose says he shot himself. He says that to Mrs. Pearson. So, Ricky is in the wind, and our man Pearson is in the morgue.
Doc, get up! Doc, come on, get up!
Is it reckless and negligent? Of course it is. Somebody died as a result of his actions.
All right, Ricky, stand up. I place him under arrest for the death of Jeffrey Pearson. Go ahead and cuff him.
Stand up. Put your hands behind the back.
In May of 1991, Ricky Fulton is convicted of criminally negligent homicide.
He received a sentence of 2 to 4 years in a Colorado State Penitentiary for causing the death of Jeffrey Pearson.
It's just a sad story because you get the feeling that Doc was really a nice person. And it always really tears at me a little bit when you've got somebody who has been through a war situation and survived it, and then they die for some weird, dopey reason.
Now you gotta remember, when Ricky's doing this, Ricky's drunk. He is really drunk. So is there intent to kill? In my opinion, no, there isn't. It's a crime committed out of stupidity, not criminal intent.
Coming up, the discovery of human remains catapults Kenda into one of the most unusual cases of his career.
Could this be a crime that's never been discovered? Could it be old? Yes. What is going on here? How can we identify this person if possible? What can we do? We can't ignore this.
In 1984, a lot of the undeveloped fields on the east side of the city were used by people that were either running, jogging, dirt bikes.
Yeah! Come on, man. It always spins out like that.
And so that's what was happening this day. Kids were out there riding their ATVs, just having some fun. And of course, when you're doing that, dirt's flying around, there's vegetation that's being torn up and everything.
Look at that burnout. There you go. Yeah. Woo! Dude, Randy, what are you doing? There's something over there.
There were a couple of people who saw something distinctive and different, and we went to explore a little closer.
Oh my God. Oh, is that a skull? Man. Hey, you didn't see me? Dude, shut up. This could be somebody's, like, relative. We gotta get the police here now. Come on. Yeah. Come on. Come on.
There was a call from a patrol unit that is in the area of Pikes Peak and Murray, and he says he needs us to respond for the discovery of HR, an abbreviation for human remains. So I buzz over there.
The area where the bones were found already has Kenda thinking foul play.
Anytime you have terrain in close proximity to a city where there are no artificial lights, no street lights, it makes it more worrisome to us that it's connected to a criminal act. Things happen, as it's often said, under the cover of darkness.
Detective Skip Arms is already on scene.
Hey, Skip. So what we got?
A couple kids out here on ATVs found the bones. There's a skull and some fragments, but they're pretty smashed up. Honestly, I don't know what we're looking at.
Undeveloped lot way out here. Definitely a perfect place to dump a body.
You got that right.
Let's take a look.
When you find human remains, it's a concern on a number of levels because you know that somebody wasn't placed there last night or last week, but that it was some time ago. That window of time could be huge, and we don't know if the person died there or was dumped there or something else. So a lot of questions.
There's no skin or tissue of any kind. So I guess it's been out here for at least a couple of years, maybe longer. Yeah.
I have some training in the putrefaction or decomposition of human remains, but it's so widely affected by the environment that we don't know what we're dealing with.
It's just too difficult to say what we got. We're gonna need some help. I already reached out to the coroner's office. They'll be here in an hour or two.
So we summon the El Paso County Coroner's Office.
Okay, in the meantime, let's go through the missing persons database to see if we can make a connection. Sounds good. We'll be back in a couple of hours. Okay. I'll let the coroner know.
Anything you can find out about this body would be helpful. One of the first things that you'd want to know is it a man or a woman?
Back at headquarters, Kenda and Arms are faced with a daunting task.
How can we identify this person if possible? What can we do? We can't ignore this. We cannot. Odds are, if this is criminal, it's local and not somewhere else. Do we have missing persons on file and it's never been discovered?
Okay, so here's another one. What year? That one is 80.
What we did in this case was to look at our own files and see if perhaps any of our older missing person cases could be tied in, because that's our only record of people that we can't account for.
We do our research into our files. We find 3 cases in the past 2 years that have some suspicious nature to them. Could they be these bones? It's a possibility.
One of them was an individual named Brian Ambrose.
Brian Ambrose was last seen kind of coming out of a seedy motel on Pikes Peak Avenue. And he was never seen again, so there's a possibility that maybe he was the one who was found in the field. Amadeo Vigil was another one that could possibly be this victim, because he was last seen hitchhiking along Interstate 25. When you're a hitchhiker, obviously you're putting yourself in danger. Who knows who could pick you up and, want to do harm to you.
Another case that we looked at was Linda Barker. She was in her early 20s, and she had last been seen driving her vehicle. Sometime after she went missing, her vehicle turned up at Denver's Stapleton Airport.
344 will be out with the 1090 vehicle.
But a check of the passenger lists from all the airlines revealed that she never got on an airplane.
Could she be in this field? Yes, she could.
These all seem like good possibilities. All right. We don't have enough info to take it any farther. Yeah, we're gonna need to know more about those bones for any chance of an ID. Yeah. Should we go back and see if the coroner has any answers for us? Let's go. All right.
Kenda and Arms have 3 possible victims from the past 2 years. They're hoping the coroner's office can rule at least one of them out.
So what do you think, Doc? You know the age of the bones?
Well, the short answer is no, we don't. The one thing that I do know is based on the calcification, they're at least a few decades old.
Really?
Because of the age of these bones, right away, police surmised that these were not the recent missing persons that they had been looking at.
Given the fragile state of these bones, I suggest that you bring in an anthropologist.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Kenda may be working a murder from the 1950s or earlier.
I'm looking at these bones and I'm thinking, are you a man or a woman? And how did you come to be here? We have human remains. They are skeletal We are initially concerned they're a missing person from the recent past in the last year or two. The coroner says the bones are calcified, indicating great age. Now we must determine what great age actually means.
To help make that determination, the detectives call in forensic anthropologist Michael Hoffman.
Yeah, so these remains are substantially damaged.
Man, you weren't kidding. We get a lot of ATV traffic through here.
He said these bones have been so disturbed by the ATV traffic and the ground and their age, they're very fragmented and very, very fragile and can even be carried off by the wind.
Digging these up intact is going to be a real challenge.
Well, any bit of info you can give us would be very much appreciated.
One of our primary goals is to determine if there's any criminal activity involved.
The only way to know that is if we can find bullet holes or knife marks in the bones to say he was killed with a weapon.
All right, let's see what I can do.
Is there anything we can do to help?
Well, I just need to keep this area clear from human traffic of any sort. There may be additional remains in the surrounding area.
All right, will do. Let's make sure we block off all the roads around here. Don't let anybody in here.
Yes,
Over the next few days, Dr. Hoffman and his team excavate the site.
It's very uncommon to have an archaeological dig in Colorado Springs in a field near town.
All right, careful now.
Archaeologists are interested in why somebody's dead, whether it's a crime or not. So they excavated it with great care, and the remains were treated well and respectfully, and we were in good hands at that point.
The excavation is a success.
All right, see you guys at the lab.
Hoffman transports the remains to Colorado College for further analysis.
I had given Dr. Hoffman a few days, but I was very interested in those results, so I swung by to see what he had learned.
Hey, Doc.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, how you doing?
See you.
So, did you find out anything?
Well, I have good news and I have bad news.
Okay, let's get the bad news out of the way first.
Well, the bad news is I can't definitively determine how this person died.
He said that the odds of us discovering the method and manner of death are relatively non-existent. Is there a possibility someone responsible for this death is alive? Well, we're going to know that if we can determine the age of the bones.
Okay, so what's the good news?
You don't have a killer on the loose.
What do you mean?
Well, anyone associated with these bones has been dead a long time.
How do you know that for sure?
This skeleton has been in the ground well over 100 years.
Hoffman decides that at a minimum, they've been in this ground for 137 years. So it's no longer a criminal matter, it's a matter of curiosity. It's a matter of preservation, but it's not criminal.
So there's absolutely no way to find out what happened to this person?
Well, there is, but it would destroy the bones in the process.
Yeah, I don't think there's any need for that.
I have no desire to destroy human remains for the sake of idle curiosity.
Truthfully, I don't think this person was killed. There's no way to know for sure, but I think this person was buried.
Really? We didn't find any gravestones or markers of any kind.
That's because I think this is a Native American burial.
No kidding.
Given the lack of white men in the area in that time frame of 1830 to 1845, the common sense likelihood is it is American Indian. That was a matter of interest to me from a historical perspective, but not from a police perspective. There are two federally recognized reservations in the state of Colorado, the Mountain Utes and the Southern Utes. A Ute is an Indian tribe, and they were commonly living in this area during the time frame in question.
Any idea whether this person was a male or female?
Yes, based on the measurements, it is an adult female. We also expanded the search, but found no sign of additional human remains.
Glad to hear that.
So the appropriate thing to do is to turn the bones over to the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Every culture on this planet among humans views the remains of one of their own with reverence. I'm well aware of that, and we would take every precaution as to not do any further damage and to try to identify the age of these remains and to preserve them as best we could once they were discovered.
While the woman's identity and cause of death remain a mystery, her remains are placed in good hands. At the time, such remains were handled by the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs. Today, because of cases like this, they are taken care of by the tribes themselves.
Our ancestors should be reburied and with no markers like they were buried before. In the same proximate area, but if not, then somewhere that we know where they're at and not shared with anybody else.
Colorado's landscape is dotted with many such burial sites.
We would like to have other people be careful of where they walk, where they go, so they wouldn't be disturbing a lot of these places where our ancestors have been put away.
A new day brings a new challenge in the police business. This is something unique. A matter of interest to me from a historical perspective, but not from a police perspective. For our purposes, the matter was closed.
The night it begins tastes like copper and static. Lights smear across wet asphalt, and the river pushes a dark breath against the levee. Slow, deliberate, like a giant thinking through its secrets. A caller's voice cracks through the 911 line at 2:11 a.m. No name, only the word screaming, and an address half swallowed by thunder. The cruiser turns the corner, and the French doors are yawning. One hinge broken, the brass handle swinging like a metronome for panic. There's a teacup on the step, still warm, lipstick bitten at the rim. In the foyer, a trail of droplets, not red but black under the porch bulb, the color of rain made heavy by something else. A photograph on the floor, a woman in a sundress with a shadow slicing her smile. The shadow is a hand reaching in from outside the frame. On the mantel, a newspaper folded to Crime Watch, circled twice, as if someone wanted the city to read its own heartbeat. Inside the empty living room, a record player hums, the needle caught at the center, a whispering loop of nothing. Cold case, someone will say with that newsroom cadence. But tonight it's fresh, raw, immediate, heat still pulsing from the lamps. The storm crawls west, the sirens move away, and the house settles back into its bones like a stage waiting for the second act. The neighbors cluster in bathrobes and opinions. Matt Tick Beyond, a headline waiting to be born, but for now it's a question in the air. Where did she go between the teacup and the torn hinge? The officers collect what they can. A red shoe under the piano, a brass button caught in the door frame, a perfumed scarf snagged on a nail like a flag of surrender. The calendar on the kitchen wall is stabbed with a pin, AUG 13, S, meat. The S means someone, the meat means here, and the question mark is a hook that will take years to pull free. The detective rubs fog from the window and sees his own face looking back, doubled by glass like an omen. He thinks about coffee, he thinks about sleep. He writes something in his notebook he will not be able to read later because the word he chooses is obvious, and nothing about this is. Morning is a chorus of seagulls and reporters. The river wears its gray like a bruise. Inside the precinct, the case file begins with a photograph that always looks like it's hiding something in the corners. A little smear the camera refuses to explain, a lift in the curtain where no curtain should lift. Her name is written in block letters, careful, respectful, final. She was a bartender who liked crossword puzzles and cinnamon gum. She kept a rosary in a mint tin and a spare key behind the third brick to the left of the back gate. She took the St. Charles streetcar home if the rain was light, if it was heavy, a cab. That night it was heavy. The driver who might have taken her swears he didn't. The last patron who swears he saw her leave swears too much. In the alley behind the bar, a line of bottle caps glitters like a breadcrumb trail to nowhere. A man in a trench coat with a pocket full of change says he heard footsteps, then silence, then a cough that didn't sound like a cough, more like a secret clearing its throat. Shock community, the anchors in tone, and the camera loves the way the beads on the wrought iron balcony catch the light. It loves the candle shrines and the posters stapled to telephone poles, missing. The posters watch the city watching itself, and the city blinks first. The detective visits the mother, hears a hallway clock scolding him, tick by tick. He listens to a voicemail saved and replayed until it's more hiss than voice. Hey mama, I'm on my way. And he hears the way the word way thins out. A rope stretching, fibers fraying. In the photo albums, there's a gap between 6th grade and 7th, a year with fewer smiles. The detective circles it with his finger in the air as if circling will conjure something. The mother says, find her. The detective says, we will. The detective means it like a promise. The city hears it like a prayer. Out by the levee, where couples kiss and arguments end, a jogger finds a cassette tape with no label. Side A is jazz and rain. Side B is the sound of a door closing and a breath that isn't the recorder's. A strange man at a pawn shop tries to sell a locket with initials that match the missing woman's, but the latch is clean. No tug marks, no rush, like it was removed by someone who owned it, someone who never expected to put it back on. Man moi kila, whispers the 12 o'clock broadcast, and the newsroom edits out the part where the reporter's hands shake. Weeks knead into months like dough into a shape that refuses to rise. The case number becomes a password and a curse. The detective visits a psychic because the mother insists, and for the first time in 15 years he doesn't laugh, he just waits, pen hovering, while the woman's eyes roll up to watch a private cinema on the ceiling. She says river, she says mirror, she says someone with a short first name that ends in a consonant. And it's the kind of prophecy you can fold into any pocket, but the mother folds it into her heart and it hurts there in a useful way. A mechanic from the 9th Ward says he saw the missing woman in a blue sedan with out-of-state plates. A tourist from Ohio sends in a blurry photograph of a woman on Bourbon Street who looks exactly like the missing woman if you squint and forgive the hair. An anonymous letter tears through the case like a thunderclap. I know who. It's written in block letters that don't match the earlier block letters, stamped from a postbox that no longer exists because the street was repaved and the past hauled off in a dump truck. The letter mentions a dock, a freight schedule, a name of a ship that left at dawn and arrived in Galveston with a dent it didn't leave with. The port logs don't show a dent, but the dock hands remember a night watchman who started showing up with new boots and a better haircut. Suspect, says a desk sergeant with a coffee permanent in his hand. Spectre, says the detective's partner, who doesn't like ghosts but likes tidy endings even less. Witnesses contradict each other like jazz riffs. Everyone is improvising around the same dropped note. A priest offers a chapel for quiet reflection. The detective kneels, nervous with unfamiliar posture, and asks a question with no mark at the end because he's too tired to raise the pen. The city proceeds as if the city could forget. Parades, confetti, pralines, brass bands flooding corners with gold noise. But at night certain streets hum with the story. Rooms remember. The house where it began is rented to a family who doesn't know about the hinge. They repaint the doors, fix the latch, ask the landlord about a discount for the draft in winter. From the crawl space, a raccoon pulls down a handkerchief with initials stitched on. Not the missing woman's, someone else's, someone's grandmother's perhaps. A relic from a different unsolved plot. Cold case breathes. That is its trick. The detective ages into a different suit, a different pair of shoes, and one day he stops walking up the precinct steps because his knees vote against it. The file goes to a younger mind with steady hands and a belief in machines. DNA, databases, digitized street cameras from an era that barely used film. Breakthrough looming, the local paper teases, and the city leans in, ready to be shocked in a satisfying way. But the shock that comes is quieter. An algorithm says the anonymous letter's fold pattern matches a stationary line from a hotel 2 blocks from the bar. A desk clerk remembers a man who always asked for a corner room with a view of the alley. First name short, last name forgotten, tips precise to the penny, a smile clipped at the edges like a coupon. Sok Kong Dong, the anchor rehearses, eyes searching for a teleprompter that can tell her how the story ends. It cannot. The story is a street with a cul-de-sac, and still, we drive. Years later, the gavel comes down on a different case, a different city, a different woman who vanished between habit and horror, and the man in the defendant's chair wears a jawline the detective recognizes from a Polaroid half-shadow. The newspapers scream solved because that's what newspapers do when the arrows finally point in one direction. They pull the New Orleans file off the shelf, dust blooms like regret, and someone ties a string from this man to that night, like tying a ribbon around a throat. New Orleans 1991 cold case solved, the Chiron prints in a font that looks confident from across the room and complicated up close. The phones at the precinct spit sparks. Reporters orbit the old house, the mother's porch, the bar where the record got stuck. But the locket at the pawn shop was never reclaimed. The cassette side B still ends with a breath that refuses to become a word. The red shoe under the piano never found its pair. The man on trial in that other city denies New Orleans with a laugh that doesn't reach his eyes. The algorithm says 87% likely. The mother says 13% can bury you. The detective, retired now, sits on his stoop with a cup that used to be coffee and listens to the freight horns carving the night into distances. He remembers the tiny detail no one cared about, the brass button in the door frame, the way it was crushed at the edge as if twisted by someone left-handed. The man on TV signs his name, right-handed. The detective turns the volume down and hears the cicadas doing their electric sermon. He thinks, solved is a headline, answered is a prayer. He thinks, the city hates loose ends but wears them like beads anyway. Across town, a woman rummaging a thrift store bin finds a scarf that smells faintly of rain and a perfume she can't name. She wraps it around her throat and swears she can hear a song if she holds still. On a forgotten shelf in a storage room, the evidence box waits with the patience of things that don't know they're being asked to perform miracles. Inside, the photograph with the reaching shadow leans up against the cassette, and the shadow looks a little more like a hand and a little more like the city itself, always entering the frame at the last second. Still unsolved, says a late-night host with a compassionate voice. And for once, the words don't feel like failure. They feel like what they are, an invitation to keep looking, to keep walking the same rain-slick streets with the same questions, to keep listening to the loop until it yields a new note. And if the headline keeps repeating its promise, if the font keeps insisting that closure has finally come, the voiceover declines to echo it. The voiceover follows the teacup's heat as it fades, follows the hinge's memory as it clicks in the dark, follows the red shoe's mate as it wanders the city looking for a foot that will never come home. Because the city knows what the city knows. Some chords ring out for years, vibrating behind walls, bleeding under doors. Some cases do not close, they settle, like silt, and make new ground you can walk on. You walk on it every day. You call it your neighborhood. You call it safe until the night the phone rings and a short first name ending in a consonant whispers that they were there, that they saw, that the river told them to keep quiet. You stand on the levee in the early blue and see your breath take shape like a confession you are not ready to make. The wind reaches in from outside the frame. The hand is the weather is the city is the case is the way the needle in the groove, against all reason, keeps finding its way back to the center. The press conference is the kind that sells sunglasses and hope, daylight so bright the microphones sparkle like fish. A captain with a square tie says words that sound like victory, closure, accountability, community confidence. Behind him, a board with photographs and lines and arrows and circles like a constellation the city has waited decades to name. In the front row, the mother wears black and doesn't blink. In the back, the retired detective feels the old ache in his knuckles and the itch to reach for a pen, to underline the word closure and draw a question mark through it like a sword. The captain thanks new forensic techniques and interagency cooperation and a citizen tip that connected the dots. The citizen is a dockhand who once wore new boots. He says he kept quiet because the boots cost more than the truth. The anchor mouth's solved because the teleprompter gives her no other choice. Headlines bloom, cold case closed, mystery no more. Shock twist ends, decades of fear. But the detective knows how the house sounds when the door closes wrong. He knows that a confession is not the same as the map of a night. He knows the city will sleep easier, and also that a part of it will never sleep again. He watches the captain hold up the locket, informs the crowd they confirmed ownership, but the latch is smooth and the initials have worn to ghosts. The detective wants to say, tell them about the button. Tell them about the breath on side B. Tell them about the hinge singing. Tell them about the algorithm's 13% and the odd way the man writes his vowels. Tell them the sun can make any board look like a constellation. Instead, he sits, listening to the river grumble, old, patient, unwilling to argue. When the microphones are switched off, the mother stands, folds a tissue into a perfect square, and steps toward the captain with the careful grace of someone who has learned to carry quake inside quiet. Her lips move, the cameras miss it. The words do not need broadcast. The captain nods like a man agreeing to an oath. Later, the newspapers will print solved in letters thick enough to touch, but the neighborhood will keep a candle in the window. The bar will keep a photograph by the register. The new tenants will notice the door somehow resists closing on cold nights. And the jogger by the levee will swear the tape from the thrift store cassette player, identical brand, different cassette, still coughs at the end the way a secret clears its throat. Shock fades, rhythm remains. The city keeps time on balcony railings and beer caps and shoe heels and file cabinets that refuse to empty. And the voiceover keeps walking, past the headline that insists, toward the room where the record player hums in a loop you can only hear if you press your ear right to the center and wait for the nothing to turn into a note. The alley behind the bar keeps its own calendar, and it never turned the page from that August. It still smells like spilled lager and rain-bloated newspapers, still hosts a cat that slips between trash cans like a rumor dodging questions. The new detective, the one who believes in machines, walks it with headphones on, not for music, but to play the cassette's hiss again, the breath at the end, the door that closes without saying why. He rewinds with a pencil, old school, lets the tape crawl back like a tide refusing to be permanent. He eats a pecan praline to kill the taste of copper in the air and files the sweetness under necessary lies. In the barroom, the piano is out of tune on purpose, a swampy charm. Under it, the space where the red shoe once slept looks like a mouth without a tooth. The bartender on duty now is a different kind of witness. She knows the legend better than the night, repeats it with the precision of a tour guide, points to the corner where the missing woman used to lean between orders, where the jukebox sometimes selected the same song twice without anyone paying. It does that, she says, shrugging, like remembering by accident. The detective sets the tape recorder on the bar, hits play, listens to the loop until his heartbeat drifts in time with the soft mechanical whir. You hear the cough? He asks. The bartender nods, then shakes her head. I hear a room trying to swallow something. He writes that down, not because it will hold up in court, but because it sounds true in a way science can't invalidate. Outside, a tourist couple poses under the neon. Their flash turns the detective's notebook into a lighthouse, then a blank shore. At the precinct, the computer builds a face from almost nothing. It's a composite of witness phrases, and the hotel clerk's memory, and the bartender's corner smile, a face saved as a file name that looks like an incantation no priest would approve. Nola, 1991, male, unknown. Short name, consonant. Tiff S plays across the screen in a dozen guesses. Sam, Sid, Sal, Seb. Each one a door the mind wants to kick open. The detective animates the face, watches it blink, tilt, breathe. He hates it. It's too obedient. Real suspects are messy and anti-algorithmic, unpredictable in ways math pretends to predict but doesn't. He prints it anyway, pins it next to the photograph with the reaching shadow, next to the brass button bagged and labeled, next to the locket whose initials have softened into suggestion. The retired detective visits on Tuesdays because habit is a religion, and stands in front of the board as if it were a painting you have to see from different angles before the trick reveals itself. Left-handed, he says, pointing at the crushed edge of the button, and cheap shirts, cheap thread. It frays when you twist. The younger detective respects him enough to argue. Or the door frame did the damage. Or the button was pocketed and squeezed later. He says it gently, like a son correcting a father about the name of a childhood neighbor. The older man nods. The board stares back, unconvinced by either. Downriver, the dockhand with the new boots, older now, boots long replaced by practical steel toes, sits at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that punishes his stomach and a letter he keeps in its original envelope because superstition prefers original packaging. The letter is his confession to himself, not a police statement. Words he wrote the night the city lit up solved, and he felt relief with a small thorn in it. He knows the schedule that summer, remembers the ships that came and went, the horn that blew twice when the fog rolled in, the flashlight path of the night watch. He remembers a particular sedan that idled where private cars shouldn't idle, the exhaust curling like a snake charmed by money. He remembers a woman's scarf caught in a splinter on a crate, remembers slipping it into his pocket without permission from his better self, remembers telling himself he'd turn it in and then forgetting on purpose. He still has the scarf. It lives in a drawer with old tax returns and a postcard of a beach he never visited. He pulls it out when the house goes too quiet, holds it like a map that refuses to show roads. Tonight he lifts it and hears, because memory plays tricks loyal as dogs, a door close and someone breathe. He dials and hangs up. Dials again, lets the phone ring through, leaves no message, because what would he say? I was there and I wasn't. I saw and I didn't. The morning paper arrives damp, headline bragging an answer. He lays the scarf over the word and watches the letters go dark underneath, muffled into honesty. The mother keeps the shrine small. A photograph on a side table, a candle she doesn't burn because wax is messy and control matters. A rosary in a mint tin. The tin clicks like a heartbeat when she opens it, and she likes that it sounds alive. She doesn't go to the press conference because cameras take things, even from people who have nothing left. She watches from home, television volume low, captions stuttering. The captain speaks, the microphones flash, the crowd swells and quiets like a breathing lung. Solved appears at the bottom of the screen, and she presses her thumb against it, a reflex to blur the word into something she can stand behind. Her neighbor brings over jambalaya and the gossip of the day, how the suspect looked too calm, how the city looked too hungry, how the rain held off as if the sky wanted a better view. The mother smiles kindly and wishes the neighbor would stop using the present tense about her daughter as if grammar could raise the dead. Later, alone, she takes the mint tin to the open window and names ships by their horns as they complain upriver. She says the names out loud because someone told her names have to be said to remain alive in the world. The horns answer with long vowels, indifferent and beautiful. Between then and now, rumor built a scaffolding around the truth and hung banners from it. Jilted lover, stranger danger, police cover-up, secret double life. Each banner flapped convincingly on certain winds. Each collected believers like Mardi Gras beads. The voiceover has seen this before in other cities with different saints and different sins. The way a story becomes architecture, the way we move furniture into the suspicious rooms of our minds and call them homes. Here in this story, a new banner goes up. Digital fingerprint nails suspect. It is the kind of phrase that makes people feel modern and safe, as if evil wears name tags now. The detective knows better. The digital fingerprint is a match of paper grain and fold frequency, a marriage of letter and hotel stationery the way faces are married to grief. Strong enough to publish, maybe, not strong enough to sing. He walks the hotel hallway anyway, counts the rooms from the corner down to the one the clerk swore was always requested. He stands in it with the door closed, breathes through the old air as if it can be sorted into layers. Rain, tobacco, aftershave, something floral that the brain decides is the perfume from the scarf. He sits on the bed and hits play on the cassette again, and the room finally makes the cough make sense. It's a long hallway cough, the kind you give when you want someone inside a room to know someone outside the room is there. A signal, we're doing this. The detective writes signal, capital letters, underlines it twice, then tears the page out because the page promised too much. The retired detective drives past the bar and doesn't park. He lets the street view slide by like parade floats, each memory throwing souvenirs he no longer wants to catch. He thinks about the hinge because the hinge is honest. It doesn't know how to perform, it simply tells with metal what happened to it. It broke on the pull from the outside, it sang when it broke. The notes of its song are still in that house somewhere. In the wood, in the nails. He believes this the way some men believe in saints. He's carried a tiny screwdriver in his pocket for 30 years because of that hinge, a ritual that makes sense only to him. He rolls the screwdriver between his fingers and imagines the world where he unscrewed the hinge that night and took it with him and forced the city to listen to its sound. He imagines the room goes quiet. He imagines someone saying, yes, that note, yes, that's the person. It is absurd, of course. Evidence is not music. But what if it is? He keeps driving. At a red light, a bus goes by with an ad on its side for a true crime tour that promises ghosts and answers. He wants to get off and buy all the tickets and tear them up and make confetti that looks like closure fluttering to the ground. The city doesn't like stagnation. It likes sweat. So the case produces more motion, even after the press conference declares the motion concluded. A new witness appears because she always appears in every story like this, the one who saw something small that refused to feel important until the word solved made it ache between her ribs. She was the florist who closed up late that week, the one who watered the hanging baskets at midnight because the day had been too bright, and she prefers to see color in the dark. She remembers a man carrying a box that night, remembers how he held it like it was both heavy and precious, the way you carry a cake you love but don't trust. She remembers the slick of rain on the street, the way his shoes made more sound than they should have. She remembers the way he looked over his shoulder, not at her but at the streetlight, as if the light itself had eyes. She tells this to the detective, and he writes it down and then asks what kind of shoes. And she says the word that shouldn't matter but lands with weight. New leather, squeaky. He thinks of the dockhand, of boots, of deals and silences, of money that finds the weak seam in a night and pours through. He asks if she's willing to go on record. She stares at the lilies opening secretly in clean water and says she's willing to put the truth in a vase and hope it lasts longer than expected. Another letter arrives, not anonymous this time, because anonymous is losing its edge in a world that can triangulate courage. It's from someone who worked housekeeping at the hotel in the early 90s who remembers a short first name ending in a consonant because she wrote it on a tip envelope once, who remembers a left-handed smear of ink on the Do Not Disturb card. She kept the card because she is a magpie and the world rewards magpies with museums and bankers' boxes under beds. She brings it in, proof in her palm, and the retired detective smiles the dangerous smile of a man whose pet theory is wearing shoes. The lab looks at the card, looks at the ink, frowns into microscopes, shrugs the universal shrug of science when science is asked to climb decades without a ladder. Maybe. Possibly. We cannot say no. It feels like yes. The captain tells the cameras progress is made, and the anchors say the word update with voices that could sell fireworks or funerals. The mother sits at her window and tests new configurations of hope and caution like an engineer working with fragile glass. She feels the wind from the river climb the stairwell and skim the photographs, and she tells herself it's nothing mystical, just weather patterns, just the way houses breathe. She likes the idea of houses breathing. It makes her less alone. Night again, because these stories prefer it. The detective returns to the levee with the tape and a portable speaker that looks like a tin can and feels like a relic, and he plays the hiss and the breath in the door into the river's answer. He does it not because the river talks, but because he needs something bigger than the precinct walls to hold the sound. In the moon-skinned water, tugboats write slow sentences, erase them, write again. A cyclist ghosts by and nods and doesn't ask what the detective is doing because this is New Orleans and people do their rituals and you let them. The detective counts between the door and the breath. He counts again. He imagines how long it takes to cross a room, to reach a hinge, to meet a face. He imagines a cough that isn't a cough. He thinks about signals. He thinks about left-handed buttons and cheap thread and the way someone might pre-stage a scene to let themselves in later without a fight. He thinks about the algorithm's likely and the mother's 13% that can bury you. He thinks about how the headline uses the word solved like a gavel when what he hears in his bones is more like a question mark turning into a hook. He goes home and cannot sleep, so he pulls the file from his kitchen chair and reads the anonymous letter again. I know who. The certainty is obscene now. He circles the word no until the O looks like a mouth that cannot say the rest. He finds the old psychic's notes because the retired detective slipped them in as a joke that refuses to be funny. River, mirror, short first name ending in a consonant. He writes mirror on a fresh page, stares at it until it loses meaning, and then realizes he's been reading the door wrong, not pulled, pushed. The hinge sings both songs if you lean your ear the right way. He stands, grabs his keys, apologies to his sleep he won't keep, drives to the house that's now a home again for people who never asked to live inside a legend. He doesn't knock. He sits in his car and looks at the door and watches the way the night wind touches it. It sways inward, not out. The city's breath pulls, not pushes. He's not sure what that means yet. He's sure it means something. The cat from the alley appears on his hood because the city loves symbols, even for people who pretend they don't. He strokes its back and the cat tolerates it like a king humoring a court jester. The detective whispers a headline to the cat, mystery deepens after solved, and laughs at himself quietly, because the cat deserves laughter. Across the street, a window light turns on. A figure moves. Life insists. The detective pockets the screwdriver he never carries but has anyway, like faith he doesn't admit. The hinge groans in his memory with the kind of music only certain ears hear. The voiceover follows him into the thought that won't let go. The door didn't break to let someone in. It broke to let someone out. And if that's true, the breath on the tape isn't menace, it's relief, a release, a message to someone waiting in a hallway. It's done, or I'm gone, or run. He doesn't write it down, not yet. Words like that should be earned under brighter light. He watches the sky think about morning and decides to sit with the house a little longer, as if patience could make the city tell the part of the truth it keeps behind its teeth. The river pushes a dark breath against the levee, slow, deliberate, like a giant reconsidering its secrets. The record needle, somewhere in the world, finds the center and hums. The cough at the end of side B clears its throat. The story keeps talking even when the cameras go home. The morning bites like citrus, sharp and clean, and the city makes promises it will not keep. The detective writes run on a sticky note and sticks it to the dashboard where it can annoy him into honesty. He maps the room again in his head, the door that gives inward, the hinge that sings, the cough in the hall, the teacup cooling on the step. He wonders who set the teacup down, if hands shook, if lipstick bit the rim, or if the rim bit back. He drives the streetcar line the missing woman used to take, not for transit, for ritual, green cars sliding under live oaks like memory on rails. The conductor today is new to the story and old to the city. The detective shows him the composite. The conductor shrugs because men become ghosts when paper tells them to. Then he pauses, taps the cheekbone on the printout with a nail-bitten square. Left ear nicked, he says, and the detective looks and sees nothing nicked. My guy had a nick, the conductor says, like fishing line, cut him once and never apologized. The detective writes, nick left ear because details are prayers. He rides to the end of the line, rides back, rides until the city stops pretending these rails are a solution and returns to being streets. At the hotel, the housekeeping woman who saved the do not disturb card sits with a cup of tea she does not drink. She tells the detective about the way certain guests leave rooms, too clean or too cruel. The man with the short name ending in a consonant left nothing behind but a mirror wiped with a cloth that smelled like rain. Not cleaner, rain. She says it twice, as if she can wring the scent back into the air. The detective thinks of the scarf again, the way perfume can argue with weather and both can win. He asks her to show him the closet. She does. He steps inside, closes the door. The dark is a different kind of dark. He hears the hallway as a patient thing, feels the sliver of light at the bottom like a blade. He coughs once, and the door carries it into the hall the way a message carries through a wire. He opens the door and feels foolish, and also certain that foolishness is a tool nobody respects until it works. The retired detective flips through his own mental Rolodex and stops at a name that was never a suspect because he was never interesting enough to be one. He was a maintenance man then, not at the hotel, at the bar. He fixed things slowly and charged quickly, and left behind a smell of pennies and damp rope. Short name, ends in a consonant, not an S. That would be too neat. He takes a drive to where the maintenance man now sells bait and advice. The shop is a cough of a building, wooden lungs full of hooks. The retired detective buys nothing and pays inattention. The maintenance man's left hand does the work while the right hand pretends to be more important. The retired detective spots the thread on his cuff, cheap, fraying where a button once lived. He sees the ear, nicked, a line drawn across flesh and time. He asks about storms and roofs and the year 91. The maintenance man's eyes do their own weather. Big rain, he says. You remember a hinge? The retired detective asks, and the maintenance man smiles like a man who likes a good hinge. I remember all hinges, he says. The retired detective leaves with a promise to bring in a reel for repair he doesn't own. He sits in his car and listens to the river in his head grind past. He writes, ear nick, lefty, hinges. The mother opens the mint tin and counts prayers instead of beads. She calls the detective's desk and lets it ring and ring without leaving a message, because messages make you choose words, and choice is its own grief. She walks to the church that smells like lemon oil and repeat offenses. The priest nods like a man who has nodded the same nod for 1,000 years. She sits in the back because anonymity is the last privacy the city allows. A tourist couple comes in by mistake, thinks the church is a museum, takes a photograph, apologizes to God out of habit. The mother stares at the stations on the wall and wishes there was one for waiting. She lights a candle she swore she wouldn't and hates the messy wax and loves the heat because the heat reminds her that something still answers to touch. The flame shivers and steadies. She says her daughter's name once, like checking a name off a roll call so the world can mark attendance, present and absence. Outside, she hears the press conference replay on someone's phone. The word solved travels strangely through stained glass, becomes softer and more suspect in colored light. The dockhand pulls another truth out of his drawer, not the scarf this time, a stub of a ticket from a parking lot that used to be a parking lot and is now a condominium with a pool that looks like an apology. The date is smudged into suggestion. The stub smells like oil, like rain, like the inside of a glove that did wrong. He puts it back and decides to be a citizen again. He drives to the precinct and walks in and says he has something, and the desk sergeant nods in the direction of a plastic chair that converts truth into waiting. The dockhand sits. The room's clock is a bully. He counts the scuffs on the tile until a detective he doesn't know calls his name gently, too gently, like you call a kid back from the edge of a pool. He explains the boots. He explains the deal. He puts the scarf on the table and the ticket stub. The detective's pen moves. The captain shakes his hand later like shaking hands can absolve. The headlines get a new word to flirt with. Break. The dockhand goes home and sleeps without dreaming for the first time in years, which scares him more than the nightmares ever did. The bartender finds a postcard in the jukebox, not behind it, in it, tucked into the maw where records take turns being remembered. The postcard shows a lighthouse that is not from here. On the back, a sentence that doesn't commit to being anything but a sentence. Had to see if the light reached this far. No name. Postmarked August 91. The bartender says nothing for a day and a night because some things need to steep. Then she calls the detective and reads the sentence out loud, and it throws a longer shadow than it should. Lighthouse. Light. Hallway. Cough. Signal. The detective finds the only lighthouse anyone can think of within the radius of a man with a car and a willingness to trespass. It's decommissioned, which is another word for asleep without permission. He climbs 100 iron steps, lungs bargaining. At the top, the glass is fractured in a spider web that froze in mid-argument. On the railing, a scratch, S+. He laughs because the city loves letters and refuses to assign them the same meaning twice. He takes a photograph. He breathes. He listens for a cough that can't possibly climb this high, and he hears only ocean from somewhere else pretending to be river. The maintenance man is at the bait shop when the younger detective goes by. The detective buys a handful of hooks to ask the price of answers. You ever work on hinges? He asks casually. The man smiles, and this time the smile does a worse thing. It remembers a different smile. I work on everything that opens, he says. The detective watches his hands coil line, left hand leading, right hand showing off. He asks about August 91, and the man says a sentence too fast. I was out of town, which is not the same as I wasn't there. The detective asks where, and the man says Texas, like a man who knows Texas is always close enough to be a plausible alibi. Galveston, the detective tosses out because he can throw too. The man's eye does a small, betraying blink. Not fear. Memory trying to hide in a hurry. The detective thanks him and steps outside into heat that makes paper damp and ideas sticky. He writes Galv on his palm and immediately sweats it into confession. The algorithm, hungry beast, eats the new data. Earnick, left-hand dominance. The bait shop address that once was a repairman's P.O. box, the postcard's postmark, the lighthouse coordinates, the dockhand stub scanned into pixels. It spits out a probability curve shaped like the river. Bends, deceptions, oxbows. 87 becomes 91 becomes 84, depending on the weight of a nick versus a hinge. The captain loves numbers because microphones love numbers. The retired detective hates them because numbers don't recall the smell of rain in closed rooms. The mother does not care. She thinks of the teacup, the lipstick bite, the way fear writes itself on porcelain. She thinks of her daughter's call, "Hey mama, I'm on my way," and of the way the word way thinned out at the end, a rope stretching, fibers fraying. She writes the word on a piece of paper and tears the paper in two, as if the act can pin the past to the table. A flood comes through the city, the way news comes through a family. Too fast, too late, washing the old stories into the front yard for everyone to step around. Basements drown, photographs turn to delicate soup. In an evidence storage room that was supposed to be dry, a box drinks more than it should. When the water recedes, a clerk with steady hands lays out damp contents on cotton like a nurse dressing wounds. The cassette case cracks and coughs up a second tape taped under the label. No markings, no side A or B. The detective picks it up with tweezers and feels absurdly like he's holding a fish. They dry it, they whisper to it, they play it. It is not what anyone hoped. No confession, no footsteps counting to a hinge. It is a recording of a jukebox song, needle hiss, a saxophone saying something that cannot be paraphrased. And at the end, after a pause long enough to wonder if you've lost the thread, a voice, not a man's, hers. Low, quick, a whisper that survives water and years like some things survive because they refuse to do anything else. 2 words. I ran. And then a cough that's a hallway cough, or a street cough, or a cough you give when you reach air after holding your breath too long. The room holds its breath. The captain wants to tell the microphones. The younger detective wants to press play again and again until the tape wears smooth. The retired detective closes his eyes and sees a hinge. The mother is called in and the tape is played, and the words travel across a room and try to land in a chest that has trained itself against landing. She closes her eyes and nods and doesn't cry because tears feel like performative punctuation. She ran, she says, and the city has to rearrange its furniture to make room for that. If she ran, from what, from whom, to where? How far can Run get on a night like that? How long can Run survive a river that wants to tell its own story? The headline that had printed "Solved" folds itself into a paper boat and floats toward the Gulf. Cold case, says the midnight host, this time with a question mark you can hear even if you can't see it. The bar keeps the postcard behind glass. The jukebox coughs its last and is repaired again, stubborn old heart. The florist brings fresh lilies for the photograph by the register and tells anyone who asks that lilies are better than roses for the unsolved because lilies know how to hold silence without making it about themselves. The bait shop closes early for the first time anyone remembers. The maintenance man drives not toward Texas but toward the levee, because men who remember know what water can do to a thought. The detective follows at a distance that feels like conscience. The river is doing its heavy breathing, slow and deliberate, and the sky is turning the color of a bruise that has decided to heal. The maintenance man leans on the rail and stares like he can bargain with a current. The detective stands far enough away to be mistaken for a shadow, close enough to hear a throat clear, a signal across a hallway the size of a wide world. The maintenance man doesn't jump. He isn't that kind of ghost. He turns and walks past the detective without seeing him because some nights are generous and allow men to miss each other. The detective watches him go and feels the city choose suspense over spectacle, like always. Back in the precinct, the board has to be rebuilt. Lines move, arrows swivel, S-meet. On the calendar gets a new theory, not a man's initial at all. Maybe a place, maybe a street, maybe a boat. The dockhand remembers a tender named Sophie that ran a short schedule in that year. and answers to no log anyone can now find. The retired detective finds a brass button catalog from a uniform supplier who no longer exists in this century and circles a model worn by nighttime men with clipboards and keys. Cheap thread, left-handed wear pattern, a match that will make no judge clap and will make every cop in the room look at the ceiling and nod because ceilings know things walls try to forget. The younger detective writes what he doesn't want to write. Solved, answered. He adds, I ran. He underlines ran. He thinks of how far that word can go on foot, on wheels, on water. He thinks of a cough in a hall and a breath at a levee and a city that writes mysteries in humidity and expects you to read them with wet hands. Night peels the day off like tape. The house where the hinge sang settles and hums. The new tenants learn the trick of the door, how it swings inward if you ask nicely and outward if you push too hard. They like to think it's the weather. They're not wrong. The mother turns off the television and lets the room fill with the old, dignified quiet of furniture that has seen too much and refused to splinter. She sits. She listens, not for footsteps. For a word that crossed water and time, she mouths it to herself, tests its angles, finds a way to forgive the part of it that hurts. The river pushes another dark breath against the levee. Somewhere a record needle refuses to give up the center. Somewhere a man with a short name ending in a consonant, left hand tired and right hand showy, wraps thread around a hook and tries not to think of buttons. Somewhere a florist waters baskets at midnight because color in the dark is truer than color at noon. And the voiceover, still walking, still whispering headlines to cats and rivers and hinges, follows the new note into the same old night. I ran. From what? To where? Who coughed? Who waited in the hall? Solved, they said. Answered, we will see. The tape's two words become a metronome. I ran. They tap inside the detective's skull while he pours coffee, while he sits through briefings that confuse victory with volume, while the city's morning show wraps the phrase in graphics and asserts a redemption arc you could sell at the checkout line next to gum. He refuses redemption. He wants sequence. How does a woman run with a river pressing its dark breath against the levee, with a hinge that sings and a teacup that cools and a cough staged for a hallway that thought it was a witness? He draws a line down the middle of a legal pad, from and to. Under from, he writes door, scarf, August, hinge. Under to, he hesitates because endings are arrogant. He writes light, alley, Sophie, Galveston, and draws arrows that make the page look like a nervous system. He walks the route she could have taken if the running began at the door, down the porch, across the small square of lawn that keeps memories like crabgrass, onto the sidewalk that leans old as a veteran. The night would have made a silk screen of the block, the lamps painting ovals, the rain cutting them into commas. Where would her feet go? To the bar? No, away from the bar. The bar is where stories circle back to trap themselves. To the streetcar? The schedule says Midnight Mercy had already passed. To a car she could drive? She didn't keep one. The city was her chassis. To a car waiting? He hates the sound of that and writes it anyway. He stops where the pavement freckles with bottle caps, sees one winking, green edge, dented crown. He picks it up, pockets it like a talisman of choices. The retired detective visits the bait shop again without a reel and buys worms he will never use, because sometimes a lie is a bridge. He watches the maintenance man wrap the paper, left hand leading, right hand performing. You ever go to the lighthouse? The retired detective asks, casual as weather. The man's ear twitches near the nick, a bird startled into stillness. Closed, he says. Everything worth a damn is closed. The retired detective nods, as if that's true, and sets the worms on the passenger seat like a passenger who smells like dirt and hunger. He drives by the hotel that birthed the Do Not Disturb card and parks where a camera can see his car and his car can see the past. At the precinct, the cassette, the second one, the one the water almost kept, sits like a saint's relic on a clean towel. The lab techs speak to it in the language of thresholds and decibels and spectrograms, drawing fingerprints out of sound the way children intuit shapes in clouds. There, one says, tapping a line that rises like a fighter. Air intake before the words. The detective leans close as if heat from his breath could translate. She was moving, the tech says, or she wanted whoever was listening to believe she was. He hates the difference. He writes move and underlines it until the paper pouts. The mother goes through a drawer she has not allowed herself to open for years. Inside, ticket stubs that have surrendered their ink to time, a hair ribbon with a knot that refuses to reconsider, and a small, ugly key she never could match to a lock. It's stamped with a number like a short sentence, 107, and has the stiff weight of motel. She phones the detective and says, without preamble, "Do you know where 107 fits?" He says no in a voice that means I will. The drawer closes with the sound of a small verdict. The florist who waters baskets at midnight becomes a compass. She remembers more than she assumed she had license to, because the city trained her to notice bloom and bruise alike. She remembers the night after the night, the way the alley felt watched, not by police, by patients. She remembers a van with a painted logo, a cartoon pelican holding a key in its beak. Locksmith, courier? She draws it clumsily, and the drawing looks like a child's joke, but the detective gives it the weight of a subpoena. He shows it around until an old landlord laughs a humorless laugh. Pelican key, he says. They used to do emergency call-outs to rich people who locked themselves out of their poor decisions. Went under in '94. Owner was a talker, short name. Ended in a consonant because vowels, he said, were for fancy people. The detective tastes metal. Left-handed? He asks, and the landlord shrugs. He held his cigarette wrong. A tourist Polaroid surfaces the way trash returns after rain, uninvited and undeniable. A couple from Ohio posts a thread of their '91 honeymoon. Beignets powdered in evidence, a man in a saint's cap making balloon animals that looked like confessions. And in the corner of one frame, a woman who could be the woman if you tilt your head and allow belief to take the wheel. She's near a payphone. She's holding a mint tin like a prayer. At the bottom, a date stamped in the orange digits of a disposable certainty, AUG 1391. The detective reaches out and the internet decides to be a neighbor for once and sends the original in an envelope that smells like attic. He pins it next to the board's constellation. He circles the payphone and writes, calls. The dockhand returns for his own absolution. He brings not just the scarf but the story he's avoided telling. The night watchman who wore a jacket too big for his frame, a jacket with buttons that looked like they were swallowing thread, a jacket that belonged to an institution that didn't pay its uniforms enough respect. Short name, the dockhand says. He signed W something. Walt, Will, Wes. No, not Wes. West. He liked directions. The detective writes West, then writes it backward in his head because mirrors have rules. TCW, useless until it isn't. He tracks Pelican Key through filings and failures, finds a P.O. box that once collected invoices and apologies. The clerk who now commands that P.O. box remembers a man with a voice like a squeaky hinge. Left-handed, the detective asks, and the clerk snorts. He stamped everything crooked to the left. The clerk says he kept a pager, old-fashioned even then, dutifully thumbing a world of beeps into outcomes. The detective visits an electronics repair shop that still sells cords for ghosts, and the proprietor produces, from a drawer deeper than sense, a ledger of pager numbers like a fossil of communication. He runs his finger down until one stops him. 50455 S lock. Cute. The number's dead, but dead numbers haunt. He calls it anyway. The recording is a museum piece. The number you have dialed. He calls again because repetition is a form of faith. On the third call, nothing changes, but something inside him does. He imagines a woman at a payphone, mint tin in one hand, coins in the other, the city loud with rain, punching digits with urgency and resolve and hearing the same useless recording and deciding to run anyway. He writes, not help, he adds, run alone. He visits room 107 in every motel that still wears a neon sign without irony. He stands in rooms where the bedspreads are stiff with resignation and the mirrors insist on showing more than faces. In one, he sees the nick on his own history, a cut he made when he chose a different case over a different night. In another, he feels a draft where a window isn't meeting its frame, a breath through wood that reminds him of a hinge at a house that has become legend. He takes photographs that capture nothing obvious and everything implied. He asks managers if they remember the Pelican Key man. One does. He slept in his van more than in rooms, she says. Said the bed gave him ideas and he didn't want those. She says his name, Walt. He writes it and flips it in his mind. T-Law. No mirror trick today. Just a name that ends in a consonant and rhymes with halt. The captain briefs the cameras with the confidence of a weather forecaster predicting yesterday. Digital forensics continue to support the case, he says, and the microphones purr. The mother watches with the volume off, reads his lips like she's learned a new alphabet in late life, one that says more in the pauses than in the consonants. She chooses not to hear solved anymore. It has become a word that bruises. She hears I ran and lets it be two things at once, a survival and a sorrow. She opens the mint tin and takes out the rosary and sets it on the sill not to pray but to watch because the city will tell you what it's doing if you give it eyes. The bartender peels the postcard from the jukebox and flips it in the light. The ink has bled into the paper like a secret deciding it's tired of edges. She notices now a small greasy fingerprint she didn't notice when it was found, a smudge the size of a vowel. She calls the detective and apologizes for touching evidence with life. He thanks her because imperfection is sometimes the only way in. The print is partial, water-warped, rude. The lab humors it and pulls from it a line that matches a line on the Do Not Disturb card. Not enough for court, enough for the room where the retired detective taps the board with a capped pen and says, almost to himself, everything that opens. A woman from a bus depot on the edge of the map steps into the precinct like an afterthought that insists. She keeps the kind of memory that does invoices for a living, dates married to times, names to numbers. She remembers a woman buying a ticket at 3:03 a.m. on August 13th, paying in cash and overpaying because coins were loud. The destination was not Galveston, not a movie ending. It was smaller, a two-light town where the bus only runs if the driver believes in it that day. The ticket was never torn at arrival. It remains in a drawer behind her counter, because drawers and counters have become the city's true archives. She shows it. The name scrawled on the line is the kind of name that isn't a name but a sentence. See me. The detective looks at it and feels something in his chest turn to the door, move toward the hall, cough for a signal. He drives to the town that isn't Galveston. It yawns between a water tower and a diner that claims the best pie in the parish and probably means it. He asks the waitress if a woman sat at the far booth that week, if she kept her hands around a cup like it was a small animal, if she asked about the kind of work a person could do that wouldn't require a name to be anything but a sound. The waitress, who played softball in Remember's arms, says yes. She remembers the way the woman watched the door and the window alternately, like choosing between sea and sky. She remembers a man who came in 2 days later asking the same question in reverse. Left-handed, ear nicked. He ordered coffee and didn't drink it. He paid in exact change and left a button on the table like a coin that didn't trust itself to be money. The detective collects the button. It is brass, crushed on the edge, left-handed twist evident like a signature you can run your thumb across. He holds it and thinks of doors and cheap thread and the city's habit of confessing in objects because people refuse. He thinks of Iran and the way it can be a beginning, not a period. He stands in the parking lot and watches a bus pull in and sigh. He imagines the woman stepping on, stepping off, stepping into a version of herself the city has never met. He imagines her in a room with a number on the key that finally fits, a mirror she covers on purpose, a radio that picks up the weather from somewhere else. He wants this to be true. He does not get to want things. He gets to weigh them. Back on the levee, the maintenance man, Walt, if names mean what they say, stares at the water as if it owes him an apology. He mumbles an argument to no one. I open things, he says. They wanted them open. He says it like a creed, like a relief, like an accusation slung toward a city that asks for spectacle and then feigns shock. The detective stands close enough, finally, to be a presence. And then, he asks, soft enough to pass for courtesy. Walt's left hand flicks a nervous loop of air. The right hand holds the rail like it could keep him from falling into an admission. And then, he says, she wasn't there. Door open. No one there. You can't pin nothing on a man for opening a door. The detective hears the hinge sing in that sentence, hears a cough in a hallway answering a cough from inside a mirror. Who coughed? He asks. Walt's ear twitches. Signal, he replies without knowing he's confessed to the only thing the detective needed in that moment. The captain will want words like confession, corroboration, closure. The detective wants sequence, and he has one, a door forced inward, a woman who runs, a hallway cough that says go, a van with a pelican on it and a man whose business model is entry, a lighthouse scratch, a postcard fingerprint, a bus ticket purchased under a plea instead of a name, a button crushed on the edge because thread fails where character does. Cold case, the anchor will say again tonight. Twists. The city will nod because it loves a twist you can dance to. The mother sits at the window and does not light the candle. She sets the ugly key on the sill next to the rosary and the mint tin and makes a still life of faiths that are not the church's. She considers the word solved and decides to demote it. She promotes, I ran to a rank where it can wear medals and scars. She whispers to the key, show me where. The wind fingers the curtain like a friend reminding you to breathe. Somewhere the jukebox survives another repair, another song, another loop. Somewhere the tape holds together one more play. Somewhere the retired detective flicks his screwdriver in the air and makes a hinge sing without touching it. Somewhere Walt tightens the lid on a jar of bait and imagines it's a memory coughing. Somewhere the bus pulls into a two-light town and the driver believes in the schedule today and a woman steps down wearing a scarf that smells like rain and resolves. The detective, who refuses redemption arcs and checkout line miracles, allows himself a small, unpublic hope That run can be a direction, not a disappearance. That some nights end at a door that opens outward. That a tape can carry across years a breath that was relief, not farewell. He doesn't write it. He pockets the bottle cap he found and lets it press a circle into his palm like a stigmata for the secular. He looks at the river doing its patient sermon and says to no one and to her, "I hear you." The cough answers from the far side of memory. The city listens, or pretends to, or maybe that's the same thing. And the voiceover keeps moving, fast, breath short, headline cadence. Cold case deepens, mystery widens, shock community not over, mon moi ki la multiplying. "I ran," she said. "We follow." The two-light town receives him with the politeness of a shrug. The water tower stares down like an unblinking witness. The diner breathes bacon and old coffee like a promise it intends to keep. He slides into the far booth, the one the waitress said the woman had chosen, hands around the cup, eyes on the door and window like she was keeping score between escape routes. The vinyl squeaks its small confession. He orders pie because the sign says best, and sometimes you have to believe a sign. The fork lifts, drops. He watches the door do nothing exciting. He asks for the register book, not because he expects paper to save him, but because paper has a history of showing up when people don't. The owner brings out a ledger that smells like grease and arithmetic. Names in ballpoint, debts in pencil. Some customers are just initials, some are jokes, some are lies whispered in ink. He finds a page cupped by August. A hand pretending not to tremble writes, S, the same S as a calendar in a kitchen that remembers rain. S sat here twice, paid exact, tipped odd numbers like she was testing the future. The owner points with a thumbnail. She asked how far the bus could go for not much, he says, and I told her, not far. She laughed like that was a relief. The motel across the street wears its vacancy like an old scar. He asks for 107. The clerk smirks. Detectives never learn subtle, but slides a key anyway, a heavy thing with a brass fob that could knock a memory loose. The room holds the heat like someone's argument. The bedspread is a geography of patience. He checks the mirror first out of superstition, then because habit is just superstition that pays taxes. He breathes on the glass and watches fog create a window inside a window. He sees nothing but himself, which is the first lie any mirror tells. The bathroom tile is cracked in the corner where chair legs teach ceramic about entropy. He kneels and finds what he expects and dreads. A bobby pin, rusted into apology, and a sliver of blue thread that doesn't belong to anything present. The thread is cheap. It frays when he rolls it between his fingers. He drops it into an envelope and writes, "Borrowed time." He takes the key to the mother like a pilgrim bringing a relic to a chapel that already has too many. He doesn't say found. He says tried. She sets the key next to the mint tin and the rosary and the ugly motel key with 107 stamped like fate. They make a still life of unsolved solution. She sat at a booth and watched both exits, he says. The mother nods in a rhythm that might be prayer or defiance. She used S, he adds. Maybe a name, maybe a shadow. The mother presses the S on the old calendar with her thumb and says to herself and to the room and to the river, "See me." The syllables land with a weight that wasn't there before. Headline cadence in a whisper. Plea becomes plan. The retired detective, who refuses hobby and takes up obsessions instead, draws hinge diagrams on napkins in a bar that pretends not to recognize him. He sketches up force vectors like he once paid attention in physics. He circles the fulcrum and writes, "Inward." He draws a hallway and fits a cough inside it like a doorbell that only a certain night can hear. He thinks of rooms, of signals, of a man whose business card should have read, "I open things." He drives back to the bait shop, buys sinkers he will not sink, and lets the conversation do its lazy circle. "Ever fix a motel lock?" he asks, as if bolts and destiny were sheet music. Walt grins like he remembers enjoying being useful. "Most hinges are just arguments in metal," he says. "You show them where to lean." The retired detective asks about nights and storms in August. Walt's left hand draws a loop in the air, a gesture like a fisherman practicing a cast in his mind. His right hand pets the counter like he is reassuring a nervous animal. "What you think I did?" he says, tone buttered with offense. "I was the guy people called when they lost the little pieces." The retired detective smiles without kindness. "You were the little piece," he says, and leaves before Walt can choose a reply. Back at the precinct, the lab pulls the spectrogram apart until the breath at the end of the tape looks like a city skyline, peaks and alleys. A tech isolates the air between the words, air as evidence, air as arrow. She turns her head mid-phrase, the tech says, translating a line of sound into a choreography of survival. If she's running, she's not alone, or she wanted someone to think she wasn't. The detective tastes the difference between the two and finds iron in his mouth. He asks to hear the cough 6 more times, then twice backward because superstition lives alongside science and neither minds the other's shoes on their carpet. Backward, it sounds like someone sucking in courage. He prefers that translation and hates himself for it. The florist watches the evening lean into the baskets she waters. Color outs itself in the dark, she says, and the city agrees. She remembers the van with the pelican again, the logo painted by a hand that believed in cartoon birds as marketing. She remembers the way it idled under the streetlight, one headlight weaker than the other, a lazy blink. She brings the detective a photo she took for no reason at all, a roll of film that sat in a drawer this long because the cost of development competed with groceries. In the corner of the glossy square, a smear of white resolves under scrutiny into beacon key. The van's sliding door displays a decal, 24/7. Emergency entry, emergency exit, emergency excuses. The detective points to a black rectangle next to the driver's handle. Pager holster, he says, as if that matters, because everything that belongs to a timeline matters. A woman from the parish records office finds the detective at his desk, like a teacher finding a student in detention. She carries a cardboard box like a newborn. Shelter logs, she says, and the room gets quiet because paper with names in crisis deserves silence until it decides otherwise. The year labeled in handwriting the city forgot it had, 1991, storm night. Inside, sign-in sheets from a church that unrolled cots and spread blankets and taught its hymnals to share space with the wet. He flips the pages like a priest handling scripture and sees the politics of panic mapped in ink. Families, neighbors, strangers who became neighbors by proximity. He sees a signature he recognizes because he has stared at it on a do not disturb card. A left lean, a consonant that ends the name like a slammed door. Walt. Another, a woman's hand that refuses loops, letters like a fence. S. The line after the S is not a last name, but a parenthesis, see me. He closes the box, opens it, closes it, as if he can change the order by will. He doesn't call the captain, he calls the mother. They sit at her kitchen table, that old courtroom, evidence of living in the sink, evidence of waiting on the wall. He lays the sign-in sheet down like a verdict. She touches the S and doesn't flinch. She knew the church, the mother says, because this is her neighborhood and her daughter inhaled it daily. She points to the pastor's name in the margin. He still lives 3 blocks over, walks with knees that sound like floorboards. They go, a small procession of purpose, and the pastor opens the door before they knock because he's learned to read the approach of need. His living room smells like lemon oil and long sermons. He studies the sheet, studies faces that belong to signatures, drags up the past like a net. She came in with rain hair, he says. She left before dawn, quieter than the storm. A man sat by the door and pretended he wasn't guarding it. He had the look of a lock that thinks it's a key. Walt, the detective says. The pastor nods like he's naming a minor saint of bad timing. He left after she left, he adds. Not together. Sequential, not simultaneous. The detective writes it down because sequence is the only thing that behaves. The bus depot clerk rewinds her own memory. She remembers the counterfeit calm in the woman's voice, the way cash looks when it's not spare but scraped. She remembers returning change in coins because paper would have embarrassed her. She pulls the drawer open and shows the ticket again, unused, unpunched. It never made the rip that says a person crossed a threshold with the blessing of a timetable. The detective thinks of unpunched tickets as artifacts of mercy or misdirection. He asks for the driver's name that night. Earl, she says, lighting a cigarette she is not supposed to light indoors, who always left 5 minutes late so people could believe in second chances. Earl remembers something when they find him later at home, watching a ball game with the sound off because he prefers to narrate it himself. He remembers a woman standing by the schedule and not boarding, remembers the way the rain softened into mist like the city was changing key. He remembers a van idling where it shouldn't, its headlight winking fatigue. He remembers a cough, one cough given like an agreed-upon unspoken word. He remembers a man in a jacket that wore him instead of the other way around. He does not remember a goodbye. He doesn't think there was one. The captain gets wind and calls a press conference because he got promoted for his waist-up brightness, and that habit doesn't turn off. He says words that slide into microphones like bodies into old suits, new leads, interagency cooperation, community partners. He says nothing useful and everything necessary to feed the machine. The banner writers recycle shock. Cold case twists again, promises to stop twisting soon. The mother watches with the sound off and reads the captain's vows for sincerity. She is too tired to score him high or low. She moves the ugly key 1/2 inch to the left, and that feels like an action. Walt begins to shrink under daylight. He doesn't like the levee anymore. It stares back. He doesn't like the bait shop's fluorescent hum. It makes his nerves flicker. He doesn't like the way left-handedness has become a personality. He stops answering the door politely. He answers it with silence. The retired detective sits in his car with the window down and lets the memory of a hinge sing its patient song. When Walt finally comes out, he walks like a man who has adjusted to a weight that isn't physical. I open the door, he says to no one, to the air, to the reporter he imagines hiding in a hydrangea. That's all. The retired detective hears an echo in the city's throat, the tape's breath, the hallway cough, the line between entry and exit, so thin you could floss with it and cut yourself. The detective drives back to the lighthouse because unsolved things like high places. He climbs the iron stairs that make lungs greedy and reaches the glass that's spiderwebbed long before this case learned to spin. He sees the scratch again. S plus son. He rubs it with his thumb because disrespect sometimes loosens meaning and sometimes earns you a cut. He looks past the glass at a horizon that refuses to confess to boundaries. He says out loud, for the lighthouse, and for the woman who ran, and for the city that pretends to hug you while checking your pockets. Signal received. The gulls don't care. The river from here looks like a sentence that goes on too long and still manages to land. He follows one more thread, the blue cheap kind that frays in his envelope. A uniform catalog, a warehouse that sold brass buttons to night watch people who signed for deliveries with hands that leaned left. He finds a ledger older than some precinct marriages and sees an order sent to Pelican Key for jackets too big for men who wanted to look official in hallways. Walt signed. The clerk who processed it stamped crooked to the left. The math on the page says the company put a man at the door of a night where a woman ran. The ledger is not a confession, it is a cord. He takes a photocopy and stands in the hallway and breathes like the tape taught him to, out of sequence, then in. Night brings a small mercy. A woman calls the tip line not for money, but to walk something out of her chest. She worked the boarding house on Rampart back when S could have used a room whose walls had no curiosity. She remembers a guest who paid cash for 3 nights and stayed 2, who slept with shoes near the door like she needed to convince her feet they still belonged to her, who woke before dawn and folded the bed as if tucking away evidence. The name in the book is another sentence. Stay moving. The woman keeps the page in case the world someday asks for proof it doesn't deserve. The detective takes the page with hands that learn reverence as a second language. He asks about anyone coming after. A man with a broken ear, she says, and the phrase is so beautiful and wrong he wants to adopt it. She means the nick. She means left-handed. She means a jacket that told a story its wearer hadn't earned. He left a button on the stair, of course he did. Cheap thread confesses when men won't. The mother sleeps for the first time in a way that doesn't apologize for itself. She dreams not of closure, but of sequences that end with a door opening and a hallway waiting and a cough that means go. She wakes with the word run in her mouth like a prayer she knows the tune to now. She does not light the candle. She opens the window instead and lets the city's late air carry in its usual mixture of fried something and brass and gossip. She says her daughter's name like a news anchor breaking a story carefully. Present, she says. In absence, the city adds. They share the line between them. The detective writes one sentence on his board and circles it so hard the ink threatens to cut through. Solved is not the same as safe. He stands back and listens to how the room receives it. The retired detective grunts approval. The captain shakes his head at the semantics of cops who prefer poetry to prosecution. The lab techs keep their heads down and chase the breath at the end of the tape through frequencies like children hunting lightning bugs with jars. The bartender tunes the jukebox by feel, coaxing it to cough only where the song needs a throat. The florist waters color into the dark. The dockhand sleeps a dreamless sleep that scares him less now that he has said a thing out loud. Walt tightens lids and loosens alibis and counts his left-handed pockets. The bus driver Earl sits on his porch and narrates a game that has already ended. He imagines a woman at a schedule choosing not to choose the bus, which is a kind of bravery that doesn't come with trophies. He thinks of his habit of leaving 5 minutes late so strangers could make decisions. He decides those 5 minutes mattered once more than the game ever will. He raises his can to the dark and says, "To second chances," and the dark, being generous for once, clinks back with a cicada's tiny toast. And the voiceover, still breath short, still headline sharp, still refusing the tidy ribbon of a boxed solved, keeps moving through the city's humid corridors, keeps cataloging Mang Moi Ki La like beads on a parade string, keeps whispering to hinges and hallways and lighthouses and left hands, cold case, shock community, mystery widens, sequence holds. She ran. We follow her footprints where rain failed to wash them. We follow the cough that meant go. We follow the blue thread that frays and the brass button that refuses to stay sewn. We follow until the door opens outward again and the room exhales a name. The city rearranges itself around the sentence on the board. Solved is not the same as safe, the way furniture shifts after a long night. Small angles, better sight lines. Nothing that admits fear out loud. The detective starts over, not with evidence, but with timing. He prints a strip of paper for every minute between 2:07 and 3:11 a.m., the window between the call and the bus that never took her, and tapes them in a line across the bullpen wall until the room looks like a cardiogram. At 2:11, the 911 breath. At 2:14, the hinge song. At 2:16, the hallway cough. At 2:19, the van headlights winking fatigue. At 2:27, the payphone mint tin call that hit a dead number. At 2:34, the church door taking in the storm's excess. At 2:51, the ticket paid for in coins. At 3:03, Earl's habit of grace. He stands back and hears the pulse the city tried to forget. He needs a path that is more than guesswork and less than fiction. So he walks it in order, carrying the tape in his pocket like a saint's bone. Porch, hinge, alley, phone, church, depot, diner, motel. In each place he counts the steps, breathes the air, lets the room impose its geometry on his bones. The hinge is honest, as always, singing the same two notes. The alley cat allows him witness privileges if he pays a toll in attention. The phone is gone, of course. In its place, a plaque that explains history to tourists who prefer their ghosts curated. The church keeps the smell of damp wood even on dry days. The depot still clicks tickets, metal teeth confessing every time a threshold is crossed. The diner's window refuses to forget the print of a hand that touched it 34 summers ago. You cannot see it, but the waitress swears she can feel it when she cleans. Room 107 has learned to be two kinds of room, the one it is and the one it was, and it offers both like a magician choosing cards. He shows the timeline to the retired detective who treats it like music, taps his fingers where he hears rests. Here, he says, pointing to the space between the cough and the van. Something quiet happened. Quiet doesn't mean nothing. He points again, between the church and the ticket window. She changed her mind here, or someone changed it for her. The detective writes quiet nothing and under pressure in caps so fat the ink bleeds. The captain wants arrests, the city wants headlines, the detective wants sequence, so he goes looking for the thing between cough and van. The florist remembers a flash of blue in the alley puddle that night, not from lights, from fabric, a scarf dipping, not dropped. He kneels in the same puddle now, dry as dust, and finds in the crack a bead of something that once wanted to be brass. He pries it out and rolls it like a pill on his palm. Not a button. A rivet head, the kind that holds together the cheap metal frame of a lockbox you could carry in a van. He writes it down as if nouns could be verbs. Rivet, holds. He visits the little print shop that used to sit 2 doors over from the bar, the one that ran tabloid flyers and Saint Day programs and keys to the city in paper form. New owners, same dust. He asks about 91 and the man who ordered Pelican key stickers. An old ledger appears with the reliability of ghosts. Orders for cartoon birds sit beside funeral programs like jokes at a wake. Walt paid cash. Walt demanded the beak be bigger. Walt picked them up the day before the hinge sang. There's a smear where his left thumb dragged ink sideways. Under the total, a handwritten note from the clerk who liked to annotate. He kept coughing. The detective takes the ledger to the lab, not for ink, but for rhythm. The cough repeats in text where it repeated in hallways. He writes signal travels on the margin of everything. He wants to hate the elegance of it. He cannot. The mother leaves the key on the windowsill like a sundial. Afternoon light hits the 107 and flares a small halo. She watches the flare like weather. She says S out loud, not as an initial, but as the sound a body makes when it narrows itself to move through a tight place. S. She phones the pastor and asks a question without punctuation. He answers in the way only old men confident in their God can. She was not alone, but she left alone. The dockhand starts repairing his own ghosts. He returns to the pier where he once traded sight for boots and looks for boot prints his mind insists still exist. He finds a mark on a piling, 2 parallel gouges as if a box corner kissed wood twice in a hurry. He remembers the weight in the van, the way a lockbox can make a vehicle list like a secret. He tells the detective and the detective asks the question nobody wants to answer. Was she in the box? The dockhand says no too fast, then slower. Then with a horror that proves it a real possibility. The detective writes no, then maybe, then God, no, and lets the page sit where he can argue with it later. The bait shop has a new padlock in the morning, heavier, overcompensating. Walt watches the detective finger lures like rosary beads. You keep coming back, Walt says. City addict, the detective says. Walt laughs like a cough. The detective points to the left cuff where thread frays, where a button will never stay. Your jacket, he says. You don't fix that? Walt looks down with a tenderness that almost repairs him. Some things, he says, you leave broken so they tell the truth about you. He says it without irony. He says it like scripture. The detective sees the line that will sit under a photograph in tomorrow's paper and hopes it never gets the chance. The lab lifts a faint print from the postcard's greasy smudge that leans left so sweetly you can feel the heart beating under the finger. It overlaps the smear on the Do Not Disturb card. It likes the ledger ink. It flirts with a partial from a brass button recovered years ago. Enough to dance, the text says, not enough to marry. The captain wants to marry. The detective prefers dancing because in dancing you can learn what someone hides when the music stops. He goes to see Earl, who watches another game with the volume off like silence is a lucky shirt. 3:03, Earl says before being asked. I stayed. I always wait 5 minutes for people like me who need 5 minutes. The detective asks if a van blocked the lane. Earl says no. It hovered, he says, and the choice of word is too good not to steal. He writes hover near the cough. You ever see her again? Earl shakes his head and then makes a small face that says maybe. Years later, he says, I thought I saw a woman on a bench in a different town holding a mint tin like it was a child, but maybe I just wanted to think the bus schedule reaches further than it does. He smiles at the river he can't see and tells it to be kind. The bartender, who has become a curator of relics against her will, calls with a new sacrament. The jukebox gave up a coin trapped behind the track selection numbers. Canadian, not ours, dated 91, a queen profile sliced across by some impatient knife. She holds it in a napkin like a communion. We had a couple in that week from up north, she says. They tipped foreign. She pocketed one once for luck. She sets the coin on the bar. It wobbles and finds a stop. The detective lets the wobble write its own verb, settle. He thinks of a bus that didn't board, a van that hovered, a church that breathed people in and out, a motel room that learned the posture of fugitives. He writes, settle stay. The pastor finds one more log and a box of bulletins and raffle tickets, a list made by a volunteer with excellent penmanship, who brought what for the storm crowd, blankets from Mrs. Aguilard, coffee urns from the Knights, keys from Pelican for emergency lock-ins. Keys. The handwriting loops around the word like it knows it's touching a live wire. The detective traces the loop with his finger and hears a hinge. The volunteer, tracked down now in a house that faces a different church, remembers a man in a jacket with too many pockets. He kept the keys like trophies, she says, and he kept clearing his throat like he was the one who owned the room. He returns to the lighthouse because the city keeps seeding answers in places with height. He climbs until his breath argues, presses his palm to the scratch, S+, and thinks of the simplest interpretation, the one he's been disqualifying because he's smarter than he is. Not S+ question, S+ key, S key, sk. He says it out loud. Skeet, dumb. Skiff, better. Sheds, no. Sk. He laughs at himself and lets it go before he harms it. The mother finds a bus schedule in an old cookbook used as a bookmark once when life assumed time could be marked. It's 91, a handwritten note next to a small town's name, Pie Good. She touches the grease ghost and knows a daughter's logic. Even running, you rank pies. She calls the detective and tells him everything and nothing. He writes Pie Good on the timeline because sometimes you need a human crumb. He goes to the Too Light town again and sits in the booth and orders pie and doesn't eat any because the ritual is the food. He asks the waitress about women with mint tins, about men with broken ears, about vans that hover. She has decided she is in the story now and wears that decision well. She brings him a napkin. On it, a drawing. Pelican with key, badly done but enthusiastic. Was outside, she writes. He laughs gently because the city trains witnesses without their consent. He asks if anyone asked about buses in the days after. A priest, she says, or a man who wanted to look like one. Collar wrong, tie right, left-handed when he signed. He asked the shop on Rampart that sews costumes for holidays and parades if anyone bought a collar in 91 in a hurry. The seamstress remembers everything that can be hemmed. He had a nick on his ear, she says. He handed the money left-handed, and I told him people who dress up as what they aren't should at least learn to button straight. So she laughs from loyalty to her old self. He shows her a photograph of Walt a lifetime later. She squints, then nods with the precision of a needle. He was less tired then, she says. Men get tired when the part of them that pretended to be metal rusts. The captain stands on steps and gives the city a version with corners sanded. Words like closure and landmark and justice walk down microphones like debutantes. The headline writers pin them and pose them and publish them until they are exhausted. The detective stands under a live oak and listens without listening. He looks at the board in his mind and moves a strip of paper an inch to the left, another an inch to the right, until the heartbeat looks like language. He hears the cough as signal. He sees the door as exit. He watches a van hover. He watches a bus wait 5 minutes for grace. He watches a woman write S in 3 places and mean 3 different things each time. See me, stay moving, solve yourself. Night again because, of course, the river pushes its deliberate breath against the levee like a verdict that takes its time. The detective walks to the house where the hinge learned to sing and stands on the porch and is polite to the ghosts. The new tenant opens the door and doesn't mind a stranger with a bad-shaped absence in his wallet. It swings better now, the tenant says, proud of having taught a house manners. The detective nods and doesn't say out loud that some lessons are crimes against evidence and kindness. He asks if the record player still hums when the needle finds its center. The tenant smiles and invites him in. The loop is still there, numb and tender and true. He lays the second tape on the turntable for ritual, not function, and lets the room listen to itself. I ran, it says again, a voice that crossed water like a benediction. The tenant shivers and doesn't know why. Walt closes the bait shop early and drives nowhere in particular. He stops on a bridge and stares at black water and says a sentence only the night deserves to hear. I open things. He waits for the night to absolve or accuse. It does neither. It coughs in the distance, a barge clearing its throat. He answers out of habit. The sound is small. The sound goes far. The mother sleeps with the window open and the key on the sill and the rosary in the tin and the bus schedule in the cookbook. She dreams this time of a booth in a diner, of pie she didn't order, of a daughter who says I ran like a graduate taking a bow. She wakes to gulls laughing sacrilegiously and forgives them their joy. She makes coffee and lets it go cold because some heat belongs to memory. The detective writes one more note on the board before the cleaning crew threatens to erase the whole wall. If she ran, someone should be tired. He underlines tired. He thinks of Walt's jacket, of Earl's 5 minutes, of the pastor's knees, of the bartender's jukebox, of the florist's midnight color, of the dockhand's dreamless nights, of his own breath at Stair 27 in the lighthouse. He thinks of the word solved sitting on the city like a hat that doesn't fit. He leaves the board and the room and goes out into the humidity that stitches everything to everything else. And he follows the cough that means go toward wherever the story wants to break next. Cold case still cold at the core. Shock community still simmering. Mon Moikila still multiplying like beads on a string. And Iran still beating like a headline that refuses to let the paper sleep. The board sleeps, but the sentence keeps working. If she ran, someone should be tired. The detective goes hunting for fatigue and finds it in all the small places men forget to stage, under nails, in cuffs, in calendars nobody thought to backdate. He asks the print shop for one more favor and gets the box nobody orders from anymore, the rejects. Pelican decals with the beak wrong, the key too straight, the letters proportioned like a lie. He flips one over and there it is, a pencil scrawl from a clerk with a sense of humor and an eye for puns. S key, and the handwriting loops a skeleton key with a grin. The scratch on the lighthouse clicks into place. Not S plus question. S key, skeleton key. The kind you use when locks aren't obstacles but suggestions. The kind a man like Walt would carry like a rosary of permission. He feels the city's breath shift. He writes on the timeline between cough and van. S key rattle. He listens again to the tape, and in the spectrogram of hiss and hallway he hears it. 2 metallic ticks between words, barely more than ghosts, exactly enough for faith. He drives to the church and asks the pastor a question that makes him smile. Did you give Pelican Key actual keys or just a list of doors? The pastor says both. A ring for emergencies, a list for indifference. The ring is gone, never returned. The list is in a drawer with raffle tickets for a barbecue the rain canceled. On the list, in a careful hand, rooms that stick, doors that swell, latches that perform at night. The parsonage closet, the rec room double doors, the fellowship hall back exit with the hinge that sings too loudly for funerals. He sits in each doorway like a man measuring his own silhouette. Each one receives him differently. In the fellowship hall, the hinge sighs with the same note the house crooned. He coughs once. The hall returns the sound to him warm. Signal received. He pictures a woman with rain hair sitting on a cot 10 feet away, hearing that cough as a promise. Go now. He adds 2 strips to the wall. 2:36 a.m. Cough in the hall. 2:37. Door ease, not force. The city's cardiogram gains a softer beat that counts more than the hammering ones ever did. The bait shop is open early, which is its own confession. Walt stands with a coffee he doesn't drink and a left hand that fidgets with nothing in particular, as if missing a key ring that used to anchor him. The detective bought all his pretexts already, so he goes bare. Skeleton key, he says. Walt smiles and winces at the same time, a mouth deciding whether to be a wound or a weapon. Every door is honest if you learn its language, Walt says, which is either poetry or pretext. Who asked you to speak for the church? The detective asks. Walt tilts his head, the nick in his ear catching light like punctuation. Church asked me, he says, and maybe it did. Storms make institutions beg favors from men they'd cross the street to avoid in sunshine. And the house? The detective asks, and Walt doesn't blink. Houses ask for help too. The detective wants to ask who else asked, who asked with money, who asked with fear, who asked with a cough. Instead he turns to the lures and touches them like beads. Walt says, to the wall, to the floor, to an alibi that won't sit still. She was gone when the door opened. I open things. That's my sermon. The detective doesn't say what he is thinking. You don't get to give sermons in a city that has already buried one for this story. The bus depot clerk finds another drawer that never knew it was a vault. A small cardboard box with lost and found oddities from the early 90s. Mittens that moved south, a matchbook from a bar with a phone number printed too confidently, and a pager. Black, simple, dead. A post-it, found under bench 3, storm night. He holds it like a tooth from a saint again and feels stupid and blessed. The electronics shop that sells cords for ghosts peels it apart gently, swabs the tiny cavity where numbers once arrived like prophecies, coaxes out a brittle paper scroll with timestamps. It's a miracle of cheap tech and humidity's mercy. The digits live. 2:19 a.m., beep. 2:34 a.m., beep. 2:36 a.m., beep. 2:51 a.m., beep. And a number repeated, the one nobody dials now, but the clerk remembers because she loved how the pattern looked on paper. 55S lock. Waltz. The log is a chisel. The detective fits it between cough and van, between church and ticket, and taps until sequence gives. He hears the cough, sees the key, hears the beep, sees the van hover, watches a woman change her mind because she heard the hallway say go and the pager say wait. He writes, 2 voices, 1 night. The mother sits with the pager on the table like a tiny coffin for messages. The detective shows her the scroll. She traces the numbers as if they might become letters if rubbed enough. He called her? She asks. Or someone called him because of her, he says, careful with pronouns the way you're careful with glass. She looks at the mint tin and the ugly key and the rosary and the bus schedule and the postcard, and they look back at her like a choir. She left alone, the pastor said. She left and he left after, the pastor said. The pager says somebody wanted to keep time on it anyway. The mother presses her thumb to 2:36 and 2:37, the minutes where someone coughed and someone moved and someone breathed relief into a tape. She says thank you out loud to whom she does not specify. The florist waters color into the dark and tells a small story she forgot she had. The phone outside the bar after the storm tasted like coins and cigarettes, and when she passed it at 3-something, the receiver hung crooked, and the dial tone sounded wrong. Not like a tone, like a plea. She slid the receiver into place, and it coughed once and died. She says this like she's admitting she helped bury a word. The detective writes dial tone cough, and the lab tech smiles despite themselves because metaphors rarely get chain of custody tags. Earl watches another game with the sound off and sips a beer that respects him. He remembers the beeps too, because the depot wasn't loud that late, and sound travels in thin air like gossip on porches. 4 beeps, he says. 1, 2, 3, and then when I would have been gone if I wasn't me, a 4th. He lifts the beer to the idea of his own small heroism. 5 minutes, a tradition more useful than most laws. You leaving late kept a heart beating, the detective says, too earnest, too true. Earl shrugs like he's swatting a compliment, but he smiles with his teeth. The retired detective cannot leave the hinge alone. He goes back to the house with a set of tuning forks no one asked him to have and a permission he didn't ask to use. He taps the hinge lightly and listens and taps and listens and finds the note that matches the fellowship hall's complaint. He grins like a boy stealing peaches. Same singer, he tells the younger, who indulges him because obsession, performed with this much joy, earns its keep. He records the note on his phone and plays it next to the tape's hiss and cough, and the spectrogram blushes, a faint harmonic line that lines up with the hinge note for half a second. She ran, and the door sang. Listen, he says, and even if it proves nothing, it proves a feeling, and that's something machines can't ruin. Walt begins to fray visibly. He wears the jacket with 1 less button, the left cuff honest enough to show bone. He speaks to customers like he's pushing words uphill. He tells a regular a story about the night boats when he never worked nights. He sneezes and calls it a cough. He stops standing at the levee and chooses the bridge instead, as if altitude grants a different kind of absolution. The detective follows, but doesn't approach. He wants not a confession, but a collapse he can map. Walt leans over the rail and flicks an invisible key into the water. He walks back to his truck left-handed, and the detective writes "tired" next to the man's name and underlines until paper threatens to tear. The shelter logs give the detective his first clean vector not written in rumor. A volunteer, teenage then, teacher now, kept a tally of who left with whom because safety in storms is math. A bracket next to S says out alone. A bracket next to Walt says out 10 minutes later. A line between them faintly drawn and erased by a hand that learned early to doubt itself. He finds the teacher in a classroom that smells like pencil shavings and redemption. She remembers the embarrassment of that night, the grown-ups crying, the cots insufficient, the way the storm sounded like someone dragging a chair across heaven's floor. She remembers the woman with rain hair resting and then standing and touching each pocket as if checking for an identity she could afford to carry. She remembers the man at the door practicing patience. He cleared his throat, she says, but it wasn't rude. It was like a challenge coin hit wood. She draws a circle in the air with her finger. Skeleton key again, tracing itself into everyone's recollection whether they know it or not. A boatman from downriver, who only sometimes answers to his phone, calls the tip line because sleep has started to taste like metal. He remembers a skiff that night. Not a big boat, a small one that knows how to be a rumor in the way a river loves rumors. He remembers a woman stepping into it from the shadow between two pylons where cameras don't care to look. He remembers she wore a scarf that forgot to smell like perfume and learned to smell like rain. He remembers a man on shore who didn't belong to the boat helping anyway, left-handed with the rope. "Nick on his ear," the boatman says, because the city loves to hand you its leitmotifs. He remembers her not looking back. He remembers her not paying. He remembers her saying 2 words without saying them. "Thank you," by the way she exhaled. The detective puts skiff between bus and van and underlines until connection trembles into coherence. The lighthouse scratch turns smug in retrospect. Eskey's cousin, skiff. He rewrites the line, from house to church to skiff to small town. The van becomes a decoy, or an option she refused. The ticket becomes a decoy to leave a wake for anyone keeping score. He stands before the wall of strips and feels the first true quiet of the case filter through the room. Not closure, not a bow, the hush of sequence. Music when the band is finally tuned. He doesn't tell the captain yet. He tells the mother, because fairness is a map you follow even if it leads you into humility. He describes the skiff the way you describe animals to children, small, stubborn, safe enough, disobedient to schedules. She listens as if he's naming a saint she forgot to light a candle for. She smiles for the first time without it hurting anyone. She had cousins downriver, she says, as if this were something the city already knew and had been waiting for him to ask. People with different last names and long memories. She says a town name that tastes like pine and pew. He writes it, feels it land. The diner confirms with pie and gossip. A woman damp and shaking 2 mornings later with a new scarf and an old habit of looking at doors, asks about jobs with no questions. She peels bills from a roll that looks like the city's apology. She cleans plates in the back room until her hands rash and doesn't complain because rashes are easier than men who cough signals. The waitress remembers because women mark women on maps the police never get to read. The boarding house ledger gets another sentence, stayed less, moved further. A postmistress in a town past that town remember a woman who mailed 1 postcard to herself with no address, only a question mark, only the lighthouse photograph tucked inside, only a mint tin's clink inside the envelope like a secret handshake. It came back insufficient, and still she smiled when she received her own failure. The postmistress kept the memory like a favor she'd be owed someday. She pays herself now by telling it. The bait shop door chimes and the detective steps in with no pretense left. "Come for a report?" Walt asks, jittery and grand. "Came for a rest," the detective says, and leans on the counter like it backs him the way rivers back bridges. He lays the pager log on the glass, lays the print shop decal with S-key pencil joke, lays the shelter bracket, lays a photograph of a skiff cut out of a church picnic flyer. Walt's left hand hangs, then twitches, then commits, and he lifts the pager log between finger and thumb like a good fish he's going to throw back. "We all keep time wrong," he says, and laughs once in a tone that isn't joy. "She ran," he says, and at last the word belongs to someone besides the tape. "Door didn't stop her. I don't stop people. I open things." His right hand tries for grandeur and fails. It shakes a little. He looks tired, the kind of tired the board predicted. "Did you chase?" the detective asks. Walt shakes his head. I waited under lights and coughed, he says. I thought waiting made me a hero. Heroes don't cough. He sets the pager log down like a weight he couldn't admit carrying. If you arrest me, he says, arrest me for the wrong stories I told myself. The captain will say accessory in a press conference because captains need nouns with edges. The detective hears something else, complicity by inertia, conspiracy with weather. He doesn't know the statute for that. He knows the city. He knows the mother, who holds the skiff story like a candle inside her ribs and walks with it steady. He knows the bartender who has learned to tune a jukebox to the pitch of Lost. He knows Earl's 5 minutes. He knows the florist's midnight color. He knows the parched print of a hand on glass and a dial tone that coughed and died. Night scalps the day with clean precision. The river pushes its deliberate breath. The levee answers with backbone. The detective goes to the lighthouse one last time because he isn't good at goodbyes in high places, forgive that. He traces S. Plothus and gives the scratch a new caption. Skiff, S-key, see me. He decides all three get to be true because this story never owed anyone a single answer economy. He looks downriver and imagines a woman stepping off a skiff into a life where S stands for something that belongs only to her. He imagines her tired in the good way. He imagines a bus that leaves on time and a driver who waits anyway as a blessing for strangers he'll never meet. He imagines a bait shop learning how to sell silence and a man with a broken ear learning how to listen. He imagines a mother sleeping with the window open, the key on the sill, the rosary in the tin, and the word solved demoted to a caption, not a command. He walks back to the car with the tape in his pocket, its hiss now more river than machine. He presses play once because rituals matter, and the voice crosses years and humidity and prayer and says it again, exactly as it should. I ran. He says back, into night and news and narrative and noise, good. And if the city insists on writing a headline before the ink is dry, he gives it one he can live inside. New Orleans, 1991, cold case solved, answer still moving. Cold case, yet warm with sequence. Shock community, yet gentler by degrees. Man Moy Kila, still multiplying but pointing finally, like streetlights toward the same door.